Tonight, recount drama in the West Midlands. Is the current Conservative Mayor Andy Street about to be toppled? A full recount for Coventry is taking place, requested by the Conservatives. A win for Labour's candidate Richard Parker would be seen as a huge blow to Rishi Sunak. On a day when Labour's been sweeping to victory in mayoral races across the country, in London, Sadiq Khan wins a historic third term. And despite fears it would be tight, he convincingly beats his Conservative rival, Susan Hall. While Andy Burnham wins a landslide re-election in Greater Manchester in a march of the Labour mayors across the country. So, will Labour give more powers to regional mayors if they win the general election? I'll be joined live by the Shadow International Development Minister, Lisa Nandy. And Sky News understands a huge effort is already underway at Conservative Party headquarters this weekend to try and calm the nerves of Tory MPs. If they lose the West Midlands, how bad could things get? Well, it's going to be a dramatic Saturday night political showdown. Josh Simons and Mercy Muroki will be with us for the next 2 hours as we buckle up. It's Saturday. I'm Sophie Ridge live from Westminster, and this is a Vote 2024 Politics Hub special. Right, here we go. Good evening. It has been another day of important election results across the country, and we're going to be bringing you all of the latest on them throughout the programme. But we have a big story brewing as we come on air, and it involves the crucial race for the West Midlands mayoralty, because a recount is underway in one of the areas in Coventry, which was requested by the incumbent Conservative Mayor Andy Street, with reports that he could be heading for defeat. Well, let's go straight there, shall we? Our political editor, Beth Rigby, is in Birmingham for us. Beth, we've had some of the areas declaring already. How is the race looking so far?
Well, Sophie, we've had 5 out of the 7 boroughs declaring already, and that puts Andy Street at the moment 4.5% points ahead, 4.5 points ahead of his rival Richard Parker. But the key thing about this is the 2 yet to declare, which are Sandwell and Coventry, are typically very heavy Labour areas, and they voted heavily for Labour candidates in the Police and Crime Commission recent elections. And as we were talking about, that recount is happening in Coventry. As we understand it, that was asked for by the Conservatives, which obviously suggests that they are looking for more votes. It is too close to call. Tory sources telling me here that Labour look chippier today than they maybe were yesterday, but it's simply too close to call. So we are waiting for that recount. To put it into context, I think there's about 135,000 votes still up for grabs in those 2 boroughs, and Andy Street at the moment is just over 20,000 votes ahead of Richard Parker. So this really is going down to the wire, and it's going to be a massive upset, because at the beginning of these local election races, really, and mayoral elections, there were questions about 2 Conservative mayoralties. It was Tees Valley with Ben Houchen and Andy Street here in the West Midlands. And the West Midlands seemed gettable. Andy Street didn't have as big a margin as Ben Houchen above Labour. And we've seen over the past couple of days too that some of the councils in the West Midlands that have been the battlegrounds of recent general elections have turned back to Labour. But there was this growing expectation that Andy Street would hold it, not least because Labour sources were reporting that they were struggling a bit in Birmingham, where they have a big majority, really. That's their kind of stronghold from tensions around Gaza. And actually, we saw this play out in this ward here. I'm actually in Birmingham. They've cleared out. We're still here. They've all gone. But in Birmingham Metro, of the votes there, the independent candidate, Ahmed Yaku, he did win about 42,000 votes. One Labour source saying to me that they thought about 30,000 Labour votes had gone to the independent candidate, amidst a lot of displeasure and unhappiness over Labour's stance over Gaza and the Hamas Israel war. But in this ward, despite that, Richard Parker, the Labour candidate, came in with 14,000 votes above Andy Street. And could that be what has tipped it? We don't know which way it's going to go. We're waiting for those recounts, but it's on an absolute knife edge, and the candidates are still here waiting for the result.
It is a knife edge, isn't it, Beth? I can see it all clearing away behind you, but I know that you're going to be staying there until we do get that result, which will bring you as soon as we can. But Beth, I just wondered if you could give us a bit of a sense, while we have you, about how important this race is. Because it felt to me like the Conservatives before this were saying, yes, we know we're going to have a ban out on the council seats, but look at the mayoralties. And it feels like this is a mayoralty that could almost define the narrative for Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, we were thinking about that a bit earlier today here, as we said, well, actually, what does it mean if Labour did take this seat? And I think what it is it would be a bit of an upset. And also, it would give a bit of momentum, wouldn't it, to Labour? It would be the surprise, if you like, that kind of gives them that winner's momentum after yesterday, in which, yes, the Tories had a dreadful night, and we can all agree that it was one of their worst performances, certainly in the past 4 decades, and it was on par, really, with the dying days of the major government in the local elections in the run-up to that big Tony Blair landslide. But you couldn't say that Labour had a total barnstormer, simply because if you boil it down to the council seats, you know, the Conservatives lost, 430 or so? Of that, Labour didn't even pick up half of those. They picked up about 170. Now, sources inside the Labour camp, I know that Keir Starmer, when I asked him when we went to Harlow, didn't want to put a figure on it. But, you know, sources in Labour were saying that they'd want to be picking up hundreds of seats. They would have wanted 250, 300 at least, and they didn't get there. So, yes, they won in key battlegrounds. Yes, they could argue that they'd won in those key constituency areas that they're going to need to win a general election. But you didn't feel this kind of huge sort of surge of Keir Starmer euphoria, you know, as people use the local elections to signal to the Conservatives, yes, they were unhappy with the government, but they didn't signal that they were therefore banked in for Keir Starmer and Labour. So I think that what this will do if they win it, will give Starmer this sense of winner's momentum, which perhaps he didn't have yesterday.
Beth, thank you very much indeed. Beth Rigby there in Birmingham. We'll go straight back to Beth, of course, as soon as we get any hint that there is movement in the West Midlands. Now, while we're waiting for that result from the West Midlands and, of course, that recount that's going on in Coventry, let's take a look, shall we, at some of the other big mayoral results that we've had come through today, starting off in London. Because last night, this time yesterday, there was all sorts of rumours flying around about a close race in London. But look at this. Sadiq Khan secured a convincing victory over his Conservative rival, Susan Hall. He received over 1 million votes, and that is a majority of over 276,000 over Susan Hall in second place. It's also the first time any candidate for London Mayor has won a 3rd term in office.
I want to express my deep gratitude to my fellow Londoners and make this pledge to you. I promise to repay the trust you've placed in me by working tirelessly to deliver the fairer, safer and greener London you deserve. It's been a difficult few months. We faced a campaign of non-stop negativity, but I couldn't be more proud that we answered fear-mongering with facts, hate with hope, and attempts to divide with efforts to unite. We ran a campaign that was in keeping with the spirit and values of this great city.
Sadiq Khan there in London, and in Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham managed another decisive win for Labour. He got more than 420,000 votes. That equals 63.4% share of the vote.
I can honestly say I have never given anything less than my all to this job, and I've tried to be there for all communities and for everyone who lives here, and I promise to do so again. For centuries, Greater Manchester has prided itself on the solidarity between its people. I have tried to be true to that tradition, rejecting the politics of division and culture wars, and that will always remain my approach.
I quite enjoyed it when I spoke to him after the result. He told me that if anyone was out in Manchester, they should buy him a pint because he was going to be out and about with his family. Andy Burnham there celebrating. He's probably on the town as we speak. There were also some Labour mayoral wins in Salford, South Yorkshire and the Liverpool City region. Plus, in West Yorkshire, where Tracy Brabin was re-elected to a second term with more than 275,000 votes, she got just over a 50% share of the votes, so again, improving her share on last time.
3 years ago, I stood in front of you and I had 10 manifesto pledges, and I am pleased that I'm able to say that we have delivered on all of those promises to you. Cheaper transport, more affordable homes, more jobs, investment, a creative new deal, and action to tackle the climate emergency. But honestly, I've just got started. I will always be eternally grateful so I can continue to deliver.
Well, we're joined now by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who is here. Sam, today's been like the march of the Labour mayors, and I guess the question now is, can they continue that march in the West Midlands?
That's right. What we've seen hour after hour is big majorities for Labour incumbents in these Metro Mayor offices. It shouldn't be a surprise that we've got high double-digit percentages for Steve Rotherham up in Liverpool or Andy Burnham. Interesting to see the Tories in second place. Their vote halving, more or less, on what we saw last time. Before we get to the West Midlands, the most interesting race, I think, was Sadiq Khan being re-elected, not because of the rumours, that was all a bit ridiculous, but because I can't remember a time the Conservatives were more happy than after the Uxbridge by-election, where I think they spotted a possible way of winning. And that way of winning was to campaign against ULEZ, the congestion charge for London for older vehicles, and pull back a bit from environmental measures more generally, and move against those low-traffic neighbourhoods that make it harder for people to drive down certain areas. And they thought that plus a strong campaign against Sadiq Khan actually had a chance of winning. And in the end, partly a result of what they would say was a poor candidate, but also partly because the real questions about whether those techniques were going to work at all, not only did Sadiq Khan win, he was re-elected with the biggest ever majority. His majority went up and he cruised back into office. And so if the Tories last year thought they got a template for running, perhaps rolling out a bigger campaign, maybe nationally, based on some of those principles, it doesn't look like that worked in London at all. But now we're on a knife edge, and we really are on a knife edge. We've got 2 boroughs left to report in the West Midlands. All my sources say it's neck and neck. They actually don't know. Coventry, one of the big areas left, is a big Labour area. It is simply too soon to say. Will it make a big difference to Rishi Sunak's fortune if Andy Street loses as opposed to wins? It might do a bit, but I think that's to focus too much on Rishi Sunak's fortunes as a consequence of this race alone is to miss the bigger picture. The bigger picture is all of these results have been absolutely terrible for the Conservatives, and whether Street nudges it and gets over the line or just falls short, Tory MPs, even if they don't move against the Prime Minister, will be looking at this set of results from by-elections to council elections to mayoralties going, am I going to hang on?
It's going to be absolutely fascinating. And we've got the current numbers on the bottom of your screens at the minute. So Andy Street on 39.5 and Richard Parker, his Labour rival, on 35. The reason Andy Street's ahead is because the 2 areas still to report are Labour leaning, it's important to say. So really, if Andy Street wants to hang on, he needs a cushion before those 2 comes in. So just to kind of explain to you what's going on. And of course, Coventry, as Sam was saying, that's one where the recount is going on, tends to vote Labour. It could come down to that. It really is on a knife edge. Right, let's introduce our panel. Our duo for the evening, shall we? Josh Simons, the Director of Labour Together, and Mercy Muroki, who was a government advisor on gender policy to Kemi Badenoch. Great to have you both on the programme. Mercy, what do you make of the results? Are they disaster zone for the Conservatives, or do you see a couple of glimmers of light?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue that many of the results have indeed been a disaster. I think there are a few silver linings that they can grab onto, that the Prime Minister can grab onto, which is, Firstly, as much as the rumours that it was going to be close in London did not materialise clearly, major pollsters did predict it would be a lot bigger. You had the likes of YouGov and Survation sort of putting it the lead for Sadiq Khan at 20%. Clearly, people do want a change. I think that's very clear from these elections. As Beth was saying, Labour haven't actually managed to pick up the number of seats that they had hoped for. So I think what the message that the Conservatives can take away is that it's not necessarily that people are very enthusiastic about Keir Starmer. It's not necessarily that people are dying to have, Labour councillors and a Labour government come into power. Clearly, people do want a change. And I think that's why we've seen as well independents and other smaller parties also getting higher vote shares. And so I think that presents a real opportunity for the Conservatives to ask themselves, what is that change? And can they represent that change? Is it too late? But as I said, I don't think it's that people are dying to have a Labour government.
I'm interested in your take on that, Josh. Is the message, as Mercy sees it, more that people are trying to send a message to the Conservatives they want change, rather than a real enthusiasm for Keir Starmer's Labour Party?
Well, I think we should remember that, of course, people can't vote for a Labour government in this election. They're not choosing between two prospective prime ministers, in which essentially it's a binary choice. In local elections, you can vote in your ward for a Green candidate, for a Lib Dem candidate, for a Reform candidate who might actually win and be in power. And so voters tend to do that in much, much, much higher numbers than they do in a general election. We in Labour Together looked into this, and about half of the voters who we polled who voted for the Lib Dems in the last local elections said they would, if it helped a Labour candidate for Parliament win, vote for that Labour candidate. So I think it's important not to overinterpret the strength of the other candidates and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, because actually in a general election, that vote tends to be squeezed, and it's a choice essentially between two prospective prime ministers.
20,000 people in London voted for bin face, I guess. So, that probably does illustrate that point to a degree. Mercy, I'm interested in your take on the West Midlands, right? If Andy Street loses, and I know it's difficult to speculate when we're going to get the result, imminently, but if he does lose, is your sense that some Conservative MPs will think, right, that's it, roll the dice, I'm putting in a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister?
I mean, it's very possible, I think, and it's a shame this has come after the Ben Houchen sort of win, and they had that hold on to. And obviously, Andy Street, we all thought he was going to win because he was very popular in the last election. I think he got 49% of the vote share. So he was and is, you'd think, a very popular mayor. And I think the story here really is that this is even happening in the first place. So if he does manage to clinch it, OK, that will be obviously a win for the Conservatives on paper. But the fact that they have had to sort of demand this recount, really, I think that's really the big takeaway, that this has happened in the first place. And I think some people who might have changed their mind, some MPs who might have changed their mind and said, OK, we can relax a bit, we can hang on, might have to reconsider that position.
Sam, I'm just going to bring you in because I've just seen that Suella Braverman has written a op-ed for The Telegraph, which is quite interesting because we have had this kind of radio silence from some of the dissenters, if you like, until now, potentially. And I just wonder if this is the first of a few rumblings of discontent. You've seen the same thing, have you, Sam? Go on, take it away. What's happening?
I've just read. It doesn't call explicitly for a change of Prime Minister. It calls for a change of direction. She says that if the Prime Minister's plan is not working and he needs to change course, otherwise we are heading for a Keir Starmer government with his band of hard left fanatics. And she calls for changes on tax, migration, boats, law and order, pulling out of the European Convention of Human Rights, those sorts of things. It's a push rightwards rather than a push for a new Prime Minister. I'm not sure he's going to do it. So where does that leave the Conservative Party?
Interesting. Can I just say I loved your reaction when we had the Keir Starmer and his band of hard left fanatics. Josh, really enjoyed that. Right, I want to go straight to Beth now. Beth Rigby, standing by in Birmingham, because Beth is where all the action is happening tonight with that West Midlands contest. Beth, what can you tell us?
Sophie, I've just had the Coventry borough results in. Remember, this is where the recount happened. Ian Parker has taken for Labour 32,704 votes. Andy Street taking 23,237 votes. So Parker about 9,000 votes ahead of Andy Street in this borough, with Sandwell, which is another Labour area, Richard Parker, another area which is the only one left to call. And it reduces Andy Street's lead now to 11,455 votes. That's a 2.2 point lead over Mr. Parker, with just one more borough to call, and that is Sandwell. And I'm trying to get a sense as to whether or not either side now are feeling that they can call it, but at the moment still too close to call. That Coventry recount giving Richard Parker about 9,000 votes over Mr. Street. It really is going down to the wire.
Wow, Beth, it really is. Thank you so much for bringing us that vote, the Coventry vote, the recount vote. And you can see the results at the bottom of your screen right now, just to see how close we are with just one of the areas still to come. Andy Street on 38.7% of the vote, Richard Parker on 36.5%. Very, very close. Josh, what do you make of it all? It is getting. I mean, it's hard to tell, isn't it? We've got one result to come in. You can see why everyone's been talking about knife edge. It has been.
Yeah, it really does feel like it's on a knife edge, and it's really close. You know, everything that my Labour friends and colleagues are telling me is that it's close. It's really close. And I think, on the one hand, it's easy to say that regardless of which way this result goes, actually the fact that it's close is the big story here. But I think in a way, if it does go for Labour, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it gives Labour momentum, as Beth was saying earlier. It gives a real sense that we've had a scoop. Both Labour and the Conservatives were saying that the West Mids would end up in Conservative hands. So if it ends up in Labour hands, everybody's confounding.
Can I just come back here? Because, look, I know everyone's saying, look, Conservatives should hold on and it's amazing if Labour win. But at the same time, the West Midlands on national vote share, it should easily be Labour, right? If you look at Tees Valley, Ben Houchen's won, but he lost, 20 points down. I mean, if Andy Street lost 20 points from last time, he'd be kind of swept away by the tide, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, Andy Street is a popular politician. It's just worth saying that out loud. I was on BBC earlier, dare I say, and they didn't even mention that he was a Conservative. They just said Andy Street versus Labour. That tells you a lot, I think, about how Andy Street is, thought and felt. I mean, he was endorsed by Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne. He's a serious big deal. So I think there is an important individual vote for him, and if Labour's able to overcome that, that's an important thing. And again, what will be interesting is the swing. That's always the thing to look at. It always matters where we're winning and what the swing is, and that's what I'll be looking for.
I always think as well that it matters for Conservative MPs and their mindset too, because every MP basically thinks they are amazing and that they have an incredible personal vote that means that they'll get elected no matter what the national vote is doing. But I guess if they look at Andy Street, who many people do think has that, personal popularity in the area, and even he loses, do you think that may make them worry?
Well, he tried to distance himself, didn't he, from the Conservatives. I think that's why he probably doesn't get referred to as Conservative mayor sometimes, because he has really tried to not take on that badge for himself in the hopes that it serves him well. I think his campaign leaflet said something like, forget about government. That was something in the campaign leaflet, although he was endorsed massively by Boris Johnson. And obviously, Boris Johnson's a tainted figure in the Conservatives, to say the least. Look, I think clearly the Conservative record, which we can all agree hasn't been excellent, I think it's hard to shake that off, even if you do try to distance yourself from that. And perhaps, as Suella Braverman has been writing in that op-ed, people just do want change, even if you try to distance yourself from that record.
One borough left to go. Can Richard Parker get 10,000 more votes than Andy Street? That's actually starting to look a little tricky.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's tough. Coventry was the Labour bit. Has that left too big a gap. I am wondering whether or not Andy Street might inch it.
It's still a bit of a cushion. I mean, it's going to be so close. It's hard to say. But like you said, there's only one area to come in now. So it will need a hefty chunk of people going for Richard Parker.
In Sandwell, which is not.
Thanks very much, indeed. Really interesting discussion. Now, if you were watching the show last night, then you would have heard us talking about a flurry of rumours that the Conservative candidate Susan Hall could have been set for a shock-strong performance against Sadiq Khan in the race to be London Mayor. I think Mel Stride, the Work and Pensions Secretary, said that he was picking up those rumours as well. Well, that was obviously complete nonsense, with Mr Khan elected for a third term in City Hall after a straightforward win. Let's just hear him speaking after that.
Really isn't about making history, it's about shaping the future of our city. It's humbling that the city that's given so much to my family, I'm able to serve. And it's about making sure that we address the everyday problems, like the cost of living crisis, making sure we provide free school meals for our kids, build record numbers of council homes, and continue to have clean air in our city. It's really important we carry on delivering. What excites me the most this year is the chance of working with a Labour government. And the message from this election in London and across the country is it's time for Rishi Sunak to call a general election.
Well, our political correspondent Darren McCaffrey is at City Hall in London. Darren, it was a resounding win for Sadiq Khan, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed, and an historic one as well. Sophie, very good evening to you too. A hat-trick, effectively. Sadiq Khan becoming the first London Mayor to win 3 wins back-to-back. And that is clearly a reflection of Labour's strength here in London and indeed some of the national swing we've seen elsewhere. But also, I think it's personally quite a big win for him as a politician, someone who clearly a lot of Londoners want to see run the city for the next 4 years. But it is also, frankly, a reflection on the Conservative Party. And, clearly the Conservative Party put an awful lot of emphasis on ULEZ, that low admission scheme that Sadiq Khan introduced, that they thought might be a game changer, particularly in the staunch Conservative areas in outer London. Now, the Conservatives did retain some support there, but not enough to make this an issue that was going to change the game for them across the city. Also focusing on crime as well, but it just doesn't seem to have made the impact. And I think, not least of all, I would say, Sophie, is because Susan Hall, as a candidate, has been pretty controversial inside and outside the party. We heard from Paul Scully, a man who wanted to be the candidate, who essentially laid in to Susan Hall today, effectively branding her as ineffective, if you like. And also what has been interesting is that Gaza and Labour's position on that has not really played a role in this campaign like it has elsewhere in the country. And that is in part because Sadiq Khan came out pretty early calling for a ceasefire. And there is a separation, I think, between that and the Labour leadership's position. But in the end, London has turned, Sophie, into an electoral problem for the Conservative Party. It is the capital city, and it is one where Labour have reinforced today their absolute control on it. And the Conservatives don't seem to have a strategy or a candidate to take that on. And that is a big problem, irrespective of what happens nationally. And I would also leave you with this thought, and it's an interesting one maybe to talk to your panellist about. I was thinking about this just now. Is there a more successful politician in office in Britain today? Sadiq Khan has got a massive personal mandate here in London with a big electorate and also has managed to win an election 3 times in a row. I can't think of anyone, maybe you guys can, but as I say, a pretty impressive personal feat for the re-elected London Mayor.
Darren, I love that. You're kind of all the way there in City Hall, but you're still getting involved in our panel chat. You're here, really. You're here at heart. Thank you very much indeed. Darren McCaffrey there. Right, what do you reckon then, panel? Darren's posed you a question. Can you think of a more successful politician than Sadiq Khan?
Well, it's funny because successful, he might be electorally successful, yes, and obviously that counts for a lot, but there was so much to attack Sadiq Khan on that a lot of it did descend into kind of vitriol and attack, ad hominem attacks, but there was so much to attack Sadiq Khan on in terms of his record. I am not a Londoner, but I've worked in London for several years now, and I actually don't think London is improving as a city. I think crime is horrific. Knife crime's, gone up. I think it's at record highs now. It's increasing at a huge rate. The Met Police is in a state. It was placed under special measures under Sadiq Khan. Nightlife is going downhill. I'm not sure people necessarily feel safe. So I wouldn't necessarily call him successful.
What do you reckon?
Well, Londoners, it seems, don't agree with that. I mean, I think the vote was partly about Sadiq and his record, and then it was partly about a divisive populist Conservative candidate who called Sadiq, who liked to tweet calling Sadiq a nipple height mayor of Londonistan. It's a sort of foretaste of things to come. You've got a Labour candidate who's got a record of delivery, 2 terms now, delivering lower bus fares, housing, against a Conservative candidate who's swinging to the right. Baiting, dividing, looking to stoke tensions. And actually what London did was roundly reject that populism and endorse Labour's record of delivery.
I just want to take you back to the high drama that's going on. The last big result of this election is the West Midlands. Sandwell, we've got 1 out of 7 boroughs left to report and 10,000 votes in it. Just some context so you know what you're looking for. Sky News estimates that Labour need to lead the Tories by a 16.3 percentage point margin in Sandwell to win the mayoralty. That's more than double their lead at the previous mayoral election in 2021, where they led by 7.7 points on first preference. It is clearly going to be so tight, nobody knows. Will they see it very well? But it'll come very, very soon.
But they're going to have to do better than last time in Sandwell, right? That's the key takeaway. Will they do it? Well, we'll be finding out pretty soon, because you are watching a Vote 2024 Politics Hub election special coming up. We are braced for the crucial West Midlands result in Birmingham. Can the current mayor, Andy Street, hold on? Not long till we find out. Sadiq Khan romps to a straightforward win in London. Is there any way back for the Conservatives in the capital? We'll hear from a former Conservative London minister next.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Hello, welcome back. You are watching a Vote 2024 Politics Hub special on Sky News. The top stories. The West Midlands mayoral election is on a knife edge tonight, with a result due very shortly after a recount for the Coventry area. We are ready, we're braced for the result, and we're going to bring it as soon as we get it. Sadiq Khan has stormed to victory in the London mayoral race with over 1 million votes to secure a historic third term. And on a day when Labour's been marching to victory in mayoral races across the country, including in Greater Manchester, where Andy Burnham won another term. Now you can stay up to date with all the local and regional election results on our digital politics hub by scanning the QR code at the bottom of your screen. Now, the Conservative recriminations to Susan Hall's defeat to Sadiq Khan in the London mayoral election earlier have started. A little bit earlier, I spoke to the former Minister for London, Paul Scully. Good to have you on the programme. Was the result a surprise to you?
Not really, Sophie. I think, what was surprised was the chatter yesterday that it was going to be closer than it actually ended up being. I'm not quite sure why that was allowed to build up. I think Labour were worrying about turnout, and we were getting excited on the outer London higher turnout because there were some queues. But judging the way that we'd ran the campaign and the approach to it, I think it was about par for the course.
What do you make of Susan Hall as a candidate? There's been some in your party who, I guess, never thought she was the right person for the job.
Yeah, well, clearly I, stood myself, and I think what we failed to do when we selected Susan and when we went through the selection process, which really was quite dysfunctional, was we failed to actually write a job description for what we want at the Mayor of London, and then the qualities that you need in a person to be able to be effectively the chief exec of the most amazing global city in the world, dealing with 9 million Londoners that can deal with our aspirations, that positive vision. Because what we've ended up with is just a campaign when people have just been moaning about Sadiq Khan, and there's plenty to moan about, but you can't just rely on a negative campaign standing alongside people wagging a finger and throwing rotten fruit at him. You've got to be on the stage articulating a positive vision.
I mean, as you said, you wanted to be Mayor for London, you applied for it, you didn't make the shortlist. Is this just sour grapes?
No, I think that's what I talk about, the job description. It is personal in terms of the fact that I had 4 years, I run £1 billion budget, and when you've got a £20 billion budget in the GLA, you've got to have people with the experience to be able to do that. You look at Andy Street in the West Midlands, and yes, it's on a knife edge, but he's running it close and ahead of the party because of his pedigree and what he's able to achieve. You look at Ben Houchen, what he's been able to achieve, and again, he's running ahead of his party. If we're just running a sort of core vote strategy in somewhere like London, you're going to end up with your core vote, which is pretty well what we've ended up with.
I mean, I'm interested in your views on this because, you are someone who knows London very well. You're the MP for Sutton and Cheam, you were former Minister for London. Do you think that really this is it now for the Conservatives in London? It's a Labour city?
No, I don't at all. And that's what does get me angry, and that's what gets me frustrated about this entire process. I don't accept that at all. If we just carry on doing what we're doing and not taking it seriously, then absolutely, because the core vote just isn't there. If you're just trying to, find people who knock on doors and activists and those kind of things, what we need to do is to articulate a vision. Conservatives are by nature aspirational. They're about giving opportunity, about reaching out into wider communities. I'm the son of someone that came over from Burma with very little when he was 18, and that's that kind of natural Conservative journey. But we failed to reconnect with that. If we can get back to what we're actually doing, forget the party colours and the tribalism, what our basic principles are, it's a really aspirational, entrepreneurial city, and that's how we win.
Paul Scully talking to us earlier about that London result. I do want to just give a recap there on what is happening in the West Midlands, because really this is a result that we are waiting for, and it could have some real consequences. It could set the narrative of the local elections. Now, this is where we are currently, with 6 of the 7 areas reported, just Sandwell to go. Andy Street currently in the lead, the Conservative candidate, and you can see there he's got 205,484 votes. In second place, Richard Parker of the Labour Party, 194,029. Now, Labour usually does well in Sandwell. That's the last result to come in. So that could change when that result comes through. But as of now, Andy Street is ahead. Have a quick look, though, at the third place candidate, Ahmed Yaqub, the independent, picking up 62,000 votes. Now, it's worth pointing out he is backed by George Galloway. He did particularly well in the Birmingham area. And you've got to think that independent candidate is probably taking votes off the Labour candidate in this contest. Sam, things are pretty close. You've been crunching the numbers for Sandwell. Where are we at?
We are down to the last few hundred votes in it, and talking to the parties, and I'm doing it to the computer, they don't know which way it's going to go. It really is down to a few hundred votes, and we don't know which way it's going to go. As you say, Sandwell, if you look at the Sandwell borough, Labour is in the lead. Last time we had this election, 49% to 41. That was the result in this borough in 2021. But the question is that going to generate enough votes, enough of a lead for Richard Parker over Andy Street to close that 11,000 gap? And nobody knows, because it's not... it's not a straight swap, right? You were just mentioning the other independent candidates, George Galloway-backed candidates who have been making inroads, you know, incredibly impressive in some ways, campaign run by other candidates in this race. And it's just hard to know exactly where they've taken votes off Labour.
Josh, I'm interested in this because we have seen, haven't we, in pockets of the country, Labour losing votes, frankly, over Gaza, right? They're losing votes for not being seen to be tough enough on the Gaza conflict. They've been able to say, look, you know, Oldham, Bradford, these are not areas that are going to decide the general election. But if it does come down to the wire here in the West Midlands, it could potentially cost them the mayoralty.
Well, let's see what happens on the West Midlands specifically. But I think the broader picture is, you know, we do have work to do. You know, I was on the doorstep on Thursday with Shabana Mahmood, Labour's most senior Muslim woman MP, and, you know, there was no question that among some Muslim voters, you know, British Muslims do not vote as a monolithic bloc, and they're not a monolithic bloc. But there were clearly some in that community who had lost trust in the Labour Party. And, you know, we will never, ever take those votes for granted. Labour have a lot of work to do. The position has evolved, so they have a story to tell now and an argument to make. And I think what you will see over the coming weeks and months until the general election is Labour really going out and explaining its position that it supports an immediate ceasefire to those voters and really trying to work hard to make sure that it does rebuild trust with those voters.
Thanks, all. Interesting discussion, and of course we're still counting down to those results. Well, the election results are sure to be featuring in tomorrow's newspapers as well. We'll have our press preview at 10:30 and 11:30 with a first look at tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicol-Turner and the senior political correspondent at the Daily Express, that is Christian Calgie. Well, we've been talking about that West Midlands contest, so let's go to Birmingham, shall we? Beth Rigby is there. We've only got the Sandwell area still to declare, Beth, and Labour needs to do pretty well, don't they, if they're going to catch Andy Street?
They do need to do well, Sophie, but it is a very, very Labour borough here in the West Midlands. And I can tell you, if you can look behind me, the Labour lot are back in the room. They're waiting now for the results. I can't see the Conservatives at the moment. So as soon as we get any more information, we will be able to give you what's happening in Sandwell. But as you said, Labour need to get about 11,000 more votes in Sandwell than Andy Street. And as it stands at the moment in Coventry, where there was that recount because the Conservatives asked for it, it came in as Richard Parker taking 32,700 votes against Andy Street on just over 23,000, and was that the decisive borough in this race? It has been, as we know, on a knife edge. I can tell you, though, that it is the Labour lot that have come into the hall as we wait for that result, which I will bring to you as soon as we get any more information.
Yeah, it does feel that we're on the countdown now, doesn't it, Beth? You no longer are the only person waiting patiently in that room. You've got a bit of company behind you. I was just looking at the Sandwell Council result, actually, a Labour hold, just to give you a bit of a sense, everyone a bit of a sense about how strong a Labour area it was. You know, 64 seats on that council are Labour, just 5 Conservatives. The Conservatives lost 6 seats last time round, so it's clearly a Labour area. But at the same time, they've got an awful lot of ground to make up as well. How are the two camps? Do you get a sense of the kind of jitters in the room?
Look, I was saying earlier today that I got a sense that Labour thought that they had edged it, but Sophie is on an absolute knife edge. Coventry, as we know, there was a recount, but Sandwell is a big Labour area, and that's the last borough to come in. As I was saying, they need 11,000 votes over Andy Street. Some clever person back at work did a swing on that. They said they need a 16-point swing against last time, although that was on a different voting system. But as you can see, they're gathering there, and we are just now waiting for that result. But as I was saying earlier, there was a sense from Labour that they thought they might have edged it, but I can't tell you any more than that. Yeah, I can't call it until I have a better sense from some of my sources about how it's going.
Yeah, don't worry, Beth, I'm absolutely not going to make you stick your neck on the line for this one. That would be really cruel, because it is looking pretty close, isn't it? We'll go straight back to you as soon as you get any movement. Let us know, and we'll come back to you. Beth Rigby there in Birmingham. I don't think so many people have ever been so focused on what is going on in Sandwell, Sam. It's you can feel the tension.
Yes, and apologies for being distracted about what's going on our screens, but it's because we are in an absolutely nail-biting situation. You know, Sandwell, I don't think anybody, as you say, we've never focused on it quite like this. It's a combination of places like West Bromwich and Oldbury and Rowley and Smethwick. It is a Labour area. It is an area that has consistently voted. It's just a question of whether or not they come out in sufficient numbers. We're looking for clues. We're looking for clues everywhere. The last time the West Midlands mayoralty was fought, the Labour candidate was actually Richard Parker.
I'm just going to jump in, because someone, Daryl, my producer, has just drawn my attention to a tweet.
Oh, this is what I'm about to say.
Oh, there you go.
You stolen my thunder.
I'm sorry.
Look, it's on my screen.
There you go.
All great minds think alike. Well done, Daryl.
This tweet we can show you now. Look at that. That is Liam Byrne, who ran for, of course, last time round to be Mayor of the West Midlands and was defeated by Andy Street with the current Labour candidate. I mean, how would you describe how they looked, Sam?
Well, you can see it's jubilation on Liam Byrne's face. I wouldn't put all of my money on that being a winning face for Richard Parker, but he wouldn't have posed for that photo unless he thought there was a reasonable chance of good. Like, it's a hint, but I'm not betting my house on it.
They can't. Surely Liam Byrne isn't going to post that picture on Twitter.
Would you put your house on that, telling us the result, though, Sophie?
I wouldn't. You're right. You're right. Knowing Liam Byrne,
I'm just looking at that expression. His expression is less clear than Liam Byrne's.
It feels like that would be an extraordinary photograph to put on Twitter 17 minutes before a result showing a Conservative victory. Come on, what do you guys think?
Well, I suppose it would, but I think they're going to see this as a win even if he loses, because of how tight it has been. So, you know, I don't think it will be unlikely that they start tweeting as if they have won, because they'll be telling the country, look how close we came. This shows that actually, you know, Labour have a real chance. Labour are a real sort of opponent to the Conservatives. So they will frame it as a win.
I mean, Liam Byrne obviously famously left the note saying there's no money left, so the guy has got a bit of form. But surely, Josh.
Well, you know it's election night when we're all hanging off a Twitter photo, trying to interpret Liam Byrne's mood, Richard Parker's mood. The interesting thing is I've had a few councillors there who've then tweeted positive things, saying they've heard it's been called for Labour as well. So it's not just
so really,
that
so tell us a bit more about that, Josh.
There's just a couple of Labour councillors saying Labour coming into the room, we think it's a good sign, etc., 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 not calling it. And Sam's unwilling to put his career on the line. Me too.
Or my house.
But all house.
But there is we can confirm Labour is in the hall. Beth Rigby was just saying that a moment ago. The Tories, as far as we know, are not. But Labour there in good numbers. If you want to celebrate, you would do that. But Yeah, I'm zooming in on the face of Richard Parker.
How happy does he look?
I think we ought to stop there.
It's an extraordinary...
He's not a kind of effusive guy, though, so you wouldn't expect too much hand movement, I don't think.
Right, let's go back to the hall, shall we? Let's go back to Birmingham, where all the action is, because, of course, we know that it is the Labour group, the Labour supporters, who have come to that hall first. You know, I've been to a few counts, you know, in my time, and it does tend to be the winning candidates group who want to get to the hall first to soak up the adulation. But again, we haven't got anything confirmed. Let's go to Beth Rigby if we can. Beth, what's happening where you are?
Well, Sophie, as you were just talking about Labour are in the room, the Conservatives, I can't see them at the moment. I was saying earlier that sources up here had been suggesting on both sides, some sources suggesting that they thought Labour might have edged it, a Conservative source saying to me that Labour was certainly looking perkier this afternoon, but I cannot call it yet because I simply don't know. Sandwell, we are waiting on it. It is a heavily Labour borough. They need, as I was saying, 11,000 votes over Andy Street in that borough in order to take this mayoralty, and it won't be an upset if that happens. Labour had been hopeful, I think, about it at the beginning, and then they began to sort of say hopes fade. We have been saying, though, all along that it was on a knife edge and it was too close to call, and my goodness, it's gone right down to the wire, hasn't it? Sandwell, we're all waiting on Sandwell. But Sophie, as soon as I get some more intelligence as to call it, I will, of course, let you know. My bat phone is poised, waiting to see if I can find out where it finally lands. But as I was saying earlier, Labour were hopeful that they could have edged it, and it was the Conservatives that called the recount that we reported, that we broke on Sky News earlier in Coventry, but we are just literally waiting for the votes now from Sandwell to say either way in this race that is going right down to what the wire, and providing excitement actually in these 2 days of coverage, some real energy going into the final counts, right? Because everything in a way has fallen as you probably would have expected with these mayoralties, and this is the one now that is really, really on the edge and will give whoever wins it momentum. But as I was saying, I think Labour were hopeful certainly earlier that they could edge it, Labour sources here.
Beth, thank you very much indeed. Do not go anywhere, Beth, because I'm sure we'll be coming back to you imminently. Well, we don't have the result yet, but we have a couple of hints, don't we? Labour, they are the group who are first in the room in the West Midlands, and Liam Byrne, of course, the former candidate for the West Midlands, tweeting a photo along with a current West Midlands candidate, Richard Parker, where they are looking, I mean, pretty triumphant, I would say. I think that would be a very, very odd photo to post on Twitter just before a defeat. I mean, who knows? We don't know. If you're looking at the bottom of your screens now, you can see that according to the numbers, you know, already in the book, the numbers in the bank so far, Andy Street is ahead, 38.7%, to Richard Parker's 36.5%. But there are signs that we're getting now that that gap may have been closed by the final area, Sandwell. Sandwell, very Labour area. In the council elections, they've just lost Conservative councillors. They've put on Labour councillors. Is it going to be Sandwell that swings it for the Labour Party? Sam?
I mean, I wish I knew. I mean, how could you do that to me? If I knew, I would tell you. I was in the middle of a deep dive into Sandwell, learning facts I never thought I would know.
Talk to us about Sandwell, then. Go on, then.
I've learnt some facts that are not repeatable at a 7 p.m. show about Sandwell. I'll tell you afterwards about what it's well known for. Look, I think there is just the odd sign from Labour coming into the room early that there is, and the odd message from some Labour folk that they are just a little bit more comfortable. They are hoping that sort of historic Labour affiliation will have got them over the line with the 11,000, closing the 11,000 gap that they need. It would be taken as sensational just given where we are, but in truth, the two parties are battling it out and there's not much in it. So it's a win, but it doesn't change the electoral maths of the country particularly. But I am quite sure that both party leaders are watching the TV right now because one of them is going to be able to claim a big win and the other is not.
It's extraordinary. It's at moments like this where it makes me take a step back and think how much can change on a handful of votes. Because, look, this is clearly an unbelievably tight contest here in the West Midlands, a real fight. Some of the announcements we've had today have been very predictable. This one has not been. And yet it could have real consequences for everyone, of course, in the West Midlands area, but also for the Conservative Party too. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't think this is one, if indeed they do lose this mayoralty, I don't think this is one they can brush over at all. I think this will be incredibly significant for many Conservative MPs, especially those who were already really thinking, actually, we really need a desperate change of direction before the next general election. I think this could be the thing that does it, the final nail in the coffin, as it were, if Andy Street does lose. So, I mean, yeah, we're all eagerly anticipating, and I'm sure Rishi Sunak is watching this very, very closely.
And Keir Starmer as well, about.
Yeah, although I think it's probably slightly more important for Rishi Sunak's fate than it is for Keir Starmer's. But, I mean, if you take a step back, one of the interesting things is that it's not a ringing endorsement of Rishi Sunak's HS2 decision if Andy Street does lose, and I think this sort of suspense, you know, the Westminster bubble being on Twitter over-interpreting photos, you know, looking at Labour councillors in the area. I think what all of this will do is kind of put a break on that Conservative Party story that they've been telling in the last 24 hours, which is essentially this was all expected. Actually, Labour are doing a bit worse than we expected in some places, and on the whole, you know, we're doing a bit better than in some places. Well, there's a screeching halt happening right now if that mayoralty does flip to Labour.
Yeah, because it feels like, to me, like a strategy from the Conservative to say, we know we're going to do badly in the councils, but not on the mayorals. Let's have a look now, because we can go straight to Beth in the West Midlands. Beth.
Breaking news, Sophie, as I understand it, Labour have won the West Mid Mayor. So Richard Parker for Labour, as I understand, has won the mayoralty from Andy Street in what will be seen as the biggest upset, I think, in this set of elections. So as I understand it, that Sandwell vote is going to come in, giving Labour enough to edge it over Andy Street. A big upset here.
That's a huge upset, isn't it? How many consequences do you think that is going to have for the Conservative Party?
Well, look, we've been talking about it, haven't we, all afternoon, and I interviewed Andrew Mitchell earlier, a minister, about it, and Sam's been talking to people, I've been talking to people. As it stands, when I've asked senior Conservatives about whether or not Labour taking the West Mids Mayor really changes the calculations around Rishi Sunak, the answer has been no, in that there is a sense now that Rishi Sunak has to own the losses of these elections, and that for many it is simply too late to change leader, that the rebels haven't been able to whip up the levels of support to change the leader. And I think Rishi Sunak, we talked about this, you know, when he did the Rwanda announcement, and then we had that trip to Poland and Berlin where he talked about defence spending and went on the stage with world leaders. He did his welfare reforms. It felt like he had a hat-trick of announcements to give the party a little bit of red meat. But look, this is all breaking. And politics is about momentum, isn't it? And this is going to be very, very, very uncomfortable for the Tory party. I imagine Keir Starmer will be absolutely delighted, and I would not be surprised if we see him here imminently in the West Mids in Birmingham. But yes, as I understand it, Richard Parker set to take the West Mids Mayor, which kind of explains why the Labour lot are in the room. A big, big, big upset here.
And it's worth pointing out, isn't it, Beth, how close this race has been. Just Sandwell to declare, and until this point, of course, Andy Street was ahead. He did have a cushion. And yet Labour now claiming that they have won the mayoralty in the West Midlands. So much can change on just a handful of votes, can't it? Yeah, I mean, look, Andy Street was, what, about 14
points ahead, I think. It was Liam Byrne who was up against him the last time around. He has built a big personal following, but as it stands, as I understand it, it's not been announced yet. This is breaking news from Sky. Andy Street is out, and as we understand it, Richard Parker of Labour has taken the West Mids mayor. Ben Houchen in Tees Valley is the last Conservative mayor standing.
Thank you very much, Beth Rigby. There you go. As Beth said, Andy Street, we understand, has been defeated as the mayor of the West Midlands. The Labour candidate is victorious, and that is what Labour sources are claiming. They are saying that the West Midlands mayoralty, the one that was always going to be super close, has gone their way. And that is a huge blow to Rishi Sunak. And I have to say, it's going to be interesting to see how Conservative MPs, already perhaps worried about their own seats, how they react to that news. Of course, Andy Street, former John Lewis boss, we understand, defeated as mayor of the West Midlands. Richard Parker, the victorious candidate for the Labour Party. Tonight, a major blow for the Prime Minister as the Conservative mayor for West Midlands is defeated. Well, after recount drama, Andy Street loses to his Labour rival Richard Parker. We'll be getting full reaction throughout the show. On a day when Labour's been sweeping to mayoral races across the country, in London, Sadiq Khan wins a historic third term, and despite fears it would be tight, he convincingly beats his Conservative rival, Susan Hall. Well, Andy Burnham wins a landslide re-election in Greater Manchester in a march of the Labour mayors across the country. Well, Sky News understands a huge effort is already underway at Conservative Party headquarters this weekend to try and calm the nerves of Conservative MPs. The former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, warns the Conservatives could get wiped out at the general election. I'll get the reaction from the former Deputy Prime Minister, David Lidington. All that and more with Josh Simons and Mercy Muroki, who will be with us for this next hour. Checking their phones, making sure they're up to speed with all of the breaking news. That's what we like to see. It is Saturday. I'm Sophie Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is a Vote 2024 Politics Hub special. Hello, good evening, and we start with breaking news. We understand at Sky News that Andy Street has been beaten in the race to become mayor of the West Midlands. Richard Parker, the new mayor. Let's go straight to Beth Rigby, shall we, who is in Birmingham for us for the counts. Beth, what's happening?
Sophie, it has been quite the day here, on a knife edge all day. We had a sense this afternoon, as I was reporting, that Labour thought they could have edged this mayoralty, that they were just edging ahead, but it has gone right down to the wire. We were not able to call it. There was a recount in Coventry where, in the end, Andy Street was 9,000 votes behind Richard Parker, the Labour candidate. In Birmingham Metro, which is by far the biggest borough here, about 200,000 voters there. It turned out that Andy Street was 14,000 votes behind Richard Parker, which was giving Labour momentum. There was the recount in Coventry. We are now waiting for Sandwell. This has not been announced, but this is what we understand. Labour think that they have edged it. So in Sandwell, it looks like those 11,000 votes in this final borough of the 7 boroughs of the West Midlands region, it looks like the Labour candidate, Richard Parker, has just edged it over Andy Street. I don't know what the result's going to be. I mean, it could be a few hundred votes. Now it makes more sense as to why the Conservatives asked for that recount in Coventry, because they were obviously looking for a few hundred votes in a recount that might have changed the whole narrative of what is unfolding here in Birmingham.
Like you say, Beth, we don't know the result in Sandwell, but we know the final result must be close, because with just Sandwell left to go, Andy Street was ahead. It just shows, doesn't it, just how close things are in the West Midlands. This, of course, is a bellwether electorally. This is partly why the parties are so keen to win it, because there are so many swing constituencies up for grabs in this area. And really, Andy Street, I guess, a politician with a big personal following, swept away by this tide of dissatisfaction in the Conservative Party. Do you think it will have consequences to how his Conservative colleagues are feeling today?
Well, I think it will be a body blow for the Conservatives. You know, they managed to hold on to Ben Houch, and it gave Rishi Sunak somewhere to go yesterday. It helped him as they lost hundreds and hundreds of council seats. They were defending nearly 1,000. They've lost 430 plus. Labour, on the other hand, didn't have this huge momentum, did they? Because they picked up 170 or so council seats, but it wasn't like they were like hoovering up Conservative seats. But look, what happened in the West Midlands, and I've got them on my phone. I can't pull them up at the moment, but when you look at the council results across the patchwork of the West Midlands, Labour were having a good time. They had taken Redditch from the Conservatives, Nuneaton, they won. There was a number of others that they either took or the Conservatives lost control of those councils. So it felt like within this region, which is a key election battleground, Labour were making progress. But Andy Street, I think, had about a 14-point lead over Labour. Liam Byrne was the previous candidate. And he's got a great personal following here. He campaigned not really as a Conservative at all, but rather as the Metropolitan Mayor. You couldn't find the Brandon anywhere. And there was hope that he would be able to hold on, not least, as I was saying, because Labour have had, especially in Birmingham, and Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley, talks to me about this a lot, about the problems that Labour have had with some of the Muslim population in terms of their votes there, people being very upset over Labour's stance over the Israel-Hamas war. One source saying to me that in the 42,000 votes that the independent candidate won in Birmingham Metro, maybe up to 30,000 of those were Labour voters switching. So actually, it could have been, had it gone a different way, and we haven't had the confirmation yet, it could have been that actually Labour's difficulties around the Gaza situation and the Israel-Hamas war could have cost them this mayoralty. But it looks, goodness me, like it's just been edged in Sandwell as it comes in with Mr. Parker, Richard Parker, looking like he's just edged over the line.
Beth, thank you very much indeed. Beth Rigby there in Birmingham, and of course we'll go back to Beth throughout the hour for more coverage of this West Midlands mayoralty. Let's just take a breather in the studio and reflect on what is an astonishing result. I think it's worth pointing out that in the run-up to these local elections, it was the Conservatives who were telling us that they should be judged on these two mayoralties, right? They were saying, look at the Tees Valley, look at West Mids. This is where we put our resources, not the council elections. And yes, they hang on in Tees Valley, but this is going to be a body blow for them, isn't it, in the West Mids?
It will be. In fairness, Sophie, Labour were saying that too. Labour were saying, judge us in the East Midlands, the West Midlands and the Tees Valley. And that's today what we're doing. And as I understand it, just a little bit of information, it could be that it's just, as Beth was saying, incredibly tight, a few hundred, just over 1,000 votes. I am told by a Labour source that they believe the winning margin will be about 0.2%.
Wow.
So if it's just over 1,000 out of a electorate of something like 3 million, that both tells you how close it was, it tells you how, you know, a win's a win. The politics actually aren't that different between the two of them. It's very, very tight. But the two different paths that I think politics could have gone down, the choice that has been made, a little bit of colour. There was a huge roar at Labour HQ, those people who are still there this evening at a little bit before 8 o'clock, when they finally worked out that they could take a breath and that they could say that they'd won. I think Keir Starmer, as Beth was saying, will go to the West Midlands now. Labour put Andy Street's defeat down to the national picture. They think he's been badly let down. There's an element to which they would say that, wouldn't they? But Labour did put huge resources into this seat. They actually switched some of their campaigning activity away from the Tees Valley, which they could see was lost, to, in particular, into West Bromwich and to Wolverhampton. And, you know, A local source says that if Rishi Sunak hadn't axed HS2, Andy Street would have won. Again, you have to put that into the category of things that they might say anyway in order to cause trouble in the Tory party, but that is what they're saying. Could this be a proper sliding doors moment for Rishi Sunak's leadership on the basis of 0.2% of the vote?
I mean, that is extraordinary. Josh, I saw you nodding to some of that, and I have to say, I feel that other than the Liam Byrne tweet, who perhaps let the cat out of the bag a bit early, I wonder if there'll be people on the phone about that. I'm not sure that was the plan. The councillors that you were talking about, Josh, perhaps that was one of the first rumblings. You should have broken it.
Definitely not my job. That will end badly. I mean, I think Sam's point there is important. He's right that Labour HQ made a very conscious decision to send activists. This is why I was in the West Midlands on Thursday on polling day, not to the Tees Valley, but into the West Midlands. And that, of course, is not an argument against this being about the national picture. It's an argument for Labour's very professional, effective campaign outfit. And this is a great test case. It's very rare in politics that a decision in a campaign to reallocate activists, you can see it in hundreds of votes, and that's what we've just seen. That's what they did, and actually that really might have been the thing that eked out that win for Labour.
That's really interesting, that kind of ruthless efficiency, if you like, in campaigning.
So important.
Mercy, I'm interested in Andy Street. Because, look, this is a guy he might have lost, but he's done better than most of the Conservatives. He's ran a campaign that's got him much, much closer than you would expect in the West Midlands. He's got a personal following. He's a former boss of John Lewis when you couldn't have a better backstory. Do you think he has a future in the Conservative Party?
I'd be very surprised if he didn't. As you say, he's one of the Conservatives, I think, who hasn't tarnished their image, and he has obviously tried very hard to distance himself from some of the chaos that has been happening sort of nationally when people think of the Conservatives. I think he still does have life left in him in terms of a political career. As you say, huge name recognition, really respectable sort of business background, which is always very valuable. He is also the first openly gay Metro mayor. So, he really does represent something that the Conservatives, do see themselves or try to portray themselves as, which is progressive, business-friendly. And so I think they would be making a mistake if they, if they didn't give him a political future beyond mayoralty.
Just before we get to you, Sam, there's been a tweet by the Deputy National Campaign Coordinator, Ellie Reeves, sister of Rachel Reeves. You might have heard of her. Also the Labour MP for Lewisham, West and Penge. She has tweeted, hopefully we should see it, "Congratulations, Richard Parker, an incredible result and a significant victory. Right across the country, people have voted for change and the message is clear. It's time for a general election and a Labour government." So there you can see Ellie Reeves tweeting a picture with Richard Parker. Confirmation, really, that Labour see this as theirs. Sam, I'm interested in your thoughts about the future of Andy Street. We're hearing there kind of, Mercy saying that he's a classic Tory, progressive, business-friendly. But I was quite interested in what you were saying before, that is there going to be a space for an Andy Street-like figure in the Conservative Party if they lose the election and go down a different path?
That's right. Look, what are the options for Andy Street in politics? One is to take one of the vacant seats and fight in the next general election. Will he really want to do that? Really want to go further into the Conservative Party when you could make an argument that it's the wider Conservative brand that has brought his mayoralty crashing down? Could he end up in the House of Lords, where you always can be a bit more of an independent figure? Or does he just go off and do other things? He is a renowned businessman who has spent a period in politics, but doesn't feel like somebody who was defined by politics. So we could see that. But I think when it comes to the kind of post-mortem of this, less for Andy Street's career, which feels like he'll go on to do something prominent next, however hard this blow is. But I think it's raking over where the Conservative Party are now. And as you've been reporting in the headlines tonight, there's a big effort underway in Conservative HQ. They are phoning around, I was told, every single Tory MP to have a chat, to ask how they're feeling, to ask whether, anything's upset them in the last couple of days, what they think about the Prime Minister. Why, it's not looking that bad, is it? And this effort, led by ministers, I think, not ministers, but CCHQ elected politicians, is designed to try and take the sting out of it. Now, they're briefing me, people involved in this effort are briefing me that people are sad but not mutinous, that they can see shards of light, or they could earlier, before all of this happened, even if they recognise the challenge, and that they understand, more than anything else, the power of personal brands, was the argument being given to Tory MPs. Well, one big personal brand couldn't, stand up to the tidal wave of sentiment going against the Conservative Party, and that's Andy Street. And we're about to hear that confirmed on the podium in front of you very, very shortly. I don't think it's going to be an instant vote of no confidence after 53 letters going in, but I do think that what the last 48 hours of results have shown you is that there are very few paths out for Rishi Sunak. He's under attack from a Labour Party that's moved a bit to the centre compared to where it was in 2019, quite successfully in this set of elections. He's under attack from a Reform UK on the right, for those people who just don't think the Tories are a Conservative party. Where does he go? It's completely unclear how he gets out of this hole, and this just will have psychologically made things so much harder.
You always have a bit of a theory where the thing that happens most recently is the thing that defines the narrative, rightly or wrongly. It's like on X Factor, like the contestant who, bear with me, the contestant who performs last always wins. Or on Strictly or whatever. If you perform last, you're more likely to get more votes. And I just feel that if Ben Houchen had happened now, and that was the end thing that happened in the local election results, Rishi Sunak would be in a much happier place. As it is, it's Andy Street. This is going to be, if you like, the defining narrative.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the big questions is, what does Andy Street do over the next sort of couple of weeks? He's going to lose. I have friends and colleagues who have worked with him very closely and really respect and admire him. And, from what I understand, he really cares about the future of the Conservative Party, and he really doesn't think it's going in the right direction. Will he say that in public? My guess is he won't. He's a loyal Conservative, and he'll keep his head down. But I think it's highly likely that he will want to be part of, the upcoming fight for the soul of the Conservative Party. And I think after tonight, that could really matter.
He did threaten to resign over HS2 last September, last October.
I remember we interviewed him at the time, and he was visibly kind of angry. I think we broke the news to him, actually, that it was being junked. Lots more discussion to come with you as well, Mercy, but I do want to go back to Birmingham and talk to Beth Rigby, our political editor, who is standing by at that all-important count. Beth, what have you got?
Well, I've got a little update, Sophie. My sources are saying to me that they think that Labour have taken this mayoralty by just over 1,000 votes. So just over 1,000 votes in this race. That is quite something, isn't it? You can understand better now why Andy Street's team asked for that recount in Coventry, and it really is going to be a big moment for Labour. I'm sure that we will see Keir Starmer. I do think we're going to hear from Andy Street after this declaration is made official as well. But for Labour, this will be really a crown jewel for them in the Tory mayoral crown, because there's only one man standing now, isn't there? The Tory mayor in Tees Valley, Ben Houchen. And for the Labour Party, I was saying to you earlier, Sophie, about the different councils. I'm just trying to get up, so I can't find my list, but basically there's a series of councils in which they were Conservative held and they've gone to Labour in this area. Sorry, Sophie, I'm trying to get them on my phone. I've got them here. There's a chain of councils that have
I love these
moved.
rolling
So
news.
you've got...
Have you got it for us? Sorry, Beth.
Rolling news, don't you love it? You're trying to find the information on your phone whilst talking into a camera. A skill that, despite doing it for many years, I haven't learned. But, they've taken Cannock Chase, Nuneaton, they've taken Redditch, so that they're winning councils, and then, the icing on the cake in the West Midlands will be this mayoralty, and they've also taken the East Midlands mayoralty, and you can see the narrative that builds, which adds on layers layers on to what Labour were talking about, because yesterday it was a bit disappointing for them. I know that they tried to spin it a certain way, but to not pick up as many council seats as they would have hoped for, to get that national equivalent vote, which is extrapolating out the local results to give you a national vote share, coming in at 35%, not knocking on the 40% or so that Michael Thrasher, our psephologist, would argue that you would need a majority. Yes, they showed big progress in marginal seats and battleground seats, but it wasn't a slam dunk. It didn't feel like it was a done deal. And what this does is it's a symbol. It's a symbol for Starmer that he can say, look, I've got momentum. I've created this upset and I've taken something off the Tories that they really thought they could hold. So it will be a real moment for Keir Starmer that I'm sure he will want to make the most out of.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't be long before he gets on a train to Birmingham. You can see that happening, can't you? Beth, I'm interested to get your thoughts on where the Conservative Party will be. Sam's already been telling us about Number 10 doing a bit of a ring round, checking in on Tory MPs, seeing how they're feeling after a couple of days. How's the bank holiday weekend going? How difficult do you think it is going to be for Rishi Sunak and Number 10 to keep momentum going in the party?
Well, look, I think what's really interesting about all of the results over the past 48 hours is what we can say for certain is that the Tories have had their worst performance in 40 years. They've been pushed into third place in terms of seat success or failures by the Liberal Democrats gaining more than they did. And that is really, really difficult. Of course it is, but they had the Tees Valley mayoral win. And here, what they could argue, and actually what you saw Andrew Mitchell arguing to me a bit earlier, was his argument was, look, in this if in the West Midlands we can win or nearly win, and you could frame it, if you're Andy Street, as I nearly won in the face of polls being 20 points behind, and in the face of Labour taking land across the West Midlands. If he can run Labour that close, if this would be the counter argument, then it shows that if you are a good local MP, this is what the argument's been put to me, if you're a good local MP and you work your area, then you have incumbency and maybe all is not lost. And I'm sure that when you interview people about this in the coming days, that will be the narrative that they try to set. Look, in terms of Rishi Sunak, when it became clear to me earlier today that Labour could edge this, and I didn't know, and I couldn't call it because it was so tight, I did contact a few Conservative sources, senior figures in the party, and I said, look, yesterday we were discussing this and you were telling me that there isn't this appetite to try and oust Rishi Sunak, that there's an acceptance that it's a dire situation, but that will not really improve it. One person said to me, he's lucky that Boris Johnson isn't in Parliament because there isn't an obvious replacement. That some senior Conservatives, as they look to the next iteration of leadership, think, let Rishi Sunak and his cabinet own these defeats and losses, and then there will be a refresh even when they lose a general election. And when I talked to my sources, it wasn't like there was suddenly a big if they lose the West Mids mayor, well, the whole calculations change. And my sources at the moment are saying to me that they don't think this will precipitate a confidence vote. Andrew Mitchell was actually saying on camera that he did not think that, and he said, and perhaps in a message to some restive MPs, he said it would be really self-indulgent to do it because although there is quite a big group of MPs that are desperately unhappy, there's another load of them that just want to get their heads down, unify and try and execute the plan that Mr Sunak is trying to set out. But of course it's going to hurt. Of course it is going to hurt to lose the West Mids mayor by just over 1,000 votes. I should say, though, to Sophie, that, as I was saying to you earlier, it could have been that Labour would have had a much bigger win here had it not been for them losing some votes in areas with Muslim populations that are very unhappy about the party's stance on the Israel-Hamas war. Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley, has been talking about that very publicly. She's been talking on our podcast. I'll just give it a quick plug. Electoral dysfunction. We had a discussion about that. You can download that if you would like to. So they could have won by a much bigger margin, potentially, had they not had that issue. And that does raise sort of interesting questions, doesn't it, going into a general election?
Beth, thank you very much indeed. And you know what? You can 100% plug the podcast after the amount of hours of TV you've done today. I think that is absolutely fair enough. Beth, thank you very much indeed. Beth standing by there in Birmingham. You can see the room filling up behind Beth. And of course, we will go straight there as soon as we get the official declaration, because clearly it has been a closely fought contest. But we are hearing from Labour that they are claiming the West Midlands mayoralty. Sam, just 1,000 or so votes in it. It's extraordinary.
That's right. And somebody who is basically a complete unknown in our politics is about to burst on the stage. Nobody's heard of him, Richard Parker. And there's very little information out there about him. He left school at 16. He joined the accountancy firm PwC, where he rose to become a partner, and he's a sort of businessman. But there is one good fact about him, which is worth sharing, which is... OK, here we go. Buckle up. Which is that Andy Street employed him. It was a few years ago. It was when Andrew Street was just getting going with the West Midlands Combined Authority, but he paid Richard Parker £25,000 for advice on, wait for it, leadership. Now, this was all about trying to advance and build the Combined Authority, the kind of local authority for that group. I think Labour pumped this information out gleefully in the middle of the campaign to make a point that Andy Street was a bit rich, calling his opponent a novice when he employed him for his business expertise. But the two men who are going to stand on stage in just a few moments actually know each other, which is quite a good fact.
Really interesting. I didn't know that, Sam. That is excellent sleuthing. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we've been talking an awful lot, haven't we, about the West Midlands. And as we wait for that crucial declaration, or confirmation, if you like, in Birmingham, we can take a look at the other big mayoral results that we've had come through today, because it's been the march of the Labour mayors. In London, Labour Sadiq Khan secured a convincing victory over his Conservative rival, Susan Hall. As you can see, he received over 1 million votes, a majority of over 276,000 over Susan Hall. The first time any candidate for London Mayor has won a third term in office.
I want to express my deep gratitude to my fellow Londoners and make this pledge to you. I promise to repay the trust you've placed in me by working tirelessly to deliver the fairer, safer and greener London you deserve. It's been a difficult few months. We faced a campaign of non-stop negativity, but I couldn't be more proud that we answered fear-mongering with facts, hate with hope, and attempts to divide with efforts to unite. We ran a campaign that was in keeping with the spirit and values of this great city.
Well, in Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham managed another decisive win for Labour. He got more than 420,000 votes, which is a 63.4% share of the vote.
I can honestly say I have never given anything less than my all to this job, and I've tried to be there for all communities and for everyone who lives here, and I promise to do so again. For centuries, Greater Manchester has prided itself on the solidarity between its people. I have tried to be true to that tradition, rejecting the politics of division and culture wars, and that will always remain my approach.
Well, there were also Labour mayoral wins in Salford, South Yorkshire and the Liverpool City region. Plus in West Yorkshire, where Tracy Brabin was re-elected to a second term with more than 275,000 votes.
3 years ago, I stood in front of you and I had 10 manifesto pledges, and I am pleased that I'm able to say that we have delivered on all of those promises to you. Cheaper transport, more affordable homes, more jobs, investment, a creative New Deal, and action to tackle the climate emergency. But honestly, I've just got started. I will always be eternally grateful so I can continue to deliver.
You are watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. An extraordinary win for Labour in the West Midlands mayoral election. We'll bring you the official declaration shortly. And Sadiq Khan romps to a straightforward win in London. Is there any way back for the Conservatives in the capital? It's an extraordinary evening. It's been a roller coaster. Do not go anywhere.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub on Sky News, the top stories. Breaking news this evening, a major blow for the Prime Minister as the Conservative Mayor for the West Midlands, Andy Street, is defeated. Well, Sadiq Khan stormed to victory in the London mayoral race with over 1 million votes to secure a historic third term. And on a day when Labour's been marching to victory in mayoral races across the country, including in Greater Manchester, where Andy Burnham won another term. Well, it's been a roller coaster evening. We do not have the official results in the West Midlands. We're waiting that declaration, but we are told from Labour sources and Conservative sources now that Andy Street's been defeated as the Mayor of the West Midlands. The Labour candidate, Richard Parker, has won. Well, joining us now to discuss that is the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, David Lidington. Thank you for being on the programme. What's your reaction to what's happened in the West Midlands?
Well, assuming that the reports you've had are true, and obviously we haven't yet heard the official declaration, then my first reaction is, great disappointment for Andy Street. I think has done a superb job as Mayor of the West Midlands over the last 8 years. He's given himself heart and soul to those citizen towns at the centre of our country. But sometimes, however formidable you are locally and regionally, the national swing is just too big for you. And lots of us who fought elections have had that experience of people coming up to you and saying, look, I think you've done a good job. I've no quarrel with you personally, but I just think there needs to be a change of party. And I fear that's what, if Andy is defeated, that's what he encountered, just as lots of really good, hard-working Conservative councillors will have been swept away in a big national swing against my party, which is clearly these were bad results for us.
I mean, look, the message, it feels like from the last couple of days, is voters just turning away from the Conservative Party in droves, voting against Andy Street in the West Midlands, but in councils up and down the country, voting for Labour, voting for the Greens, voting for independence, voting for reform, voting for anybody apart from the Conservative Party. What can your party do now, if anything, to win those voters back?
I think I think there are things that can be done, but I think it always was going to be difficult this year, simply because we'll have been in office for 14 years. There'll be people voting in this year's general election who were 4 years old when David Cameron first entered 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister. If you voted in an election that the Labour Party won, a general election, you need to be 37 or older in 2024. So that sense that, perhaps we should have a change was always going to be a big challenge to my party. So too was the fact that instead of facing Jeremy Corbyn, who a lot of people just were really frightened at the thought of seeing in Downing Street, you're up against Keir Starmer, and I have big disagreements with Keir Starmer. I don't think he'd be as good as Prime Minister as Rishi Sunak, but he doesn't scare people in the way that Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019. So what could Tories do about it? I think there's a number of things. I mean, the first thing I think is just to accept there's no gimmicks. I think the public will be deeply sceptical about white rabbits being pulled out of hats at the last minute. I think that the PM and his team really need to concentrate on delivering results on the economy, on health and other key public services, on those levelling up projects that can be delivered or taken significantly forward in the months that remain before the general election, actually show they're focused on what the people care about and that they are delivering results incrementally, bit by bit. Secondly, I would like to see the PM set out his stall more clearly for why he wants a further term in number 10. In what way would the country change for the better if Rishi gets another 5 years at the helm? And third, I do think Tory MPs actually need to show they want to win. Those of us who are directly involved in politics, people like you, like me, like you, Sophie, like me, have to perhaps we overestimate the amount of time in an average week most people spend thinking about politics. If in the few minutes people devote to thinking about the Conservative Party in a week, all they see is people who don't seem to like each other very much, who are plotting, who are disagreeing, who are squabbling amongst themselves, not focusing on what the public worry about, well, then it's hardly surprising if they turn against the party. So I was relieved when I was sort of hearing people say in the last 24 hours that actually the idea of a challenge to the Prime Minister seems to be dissipating. I think the public would think we had taken complete leave of our senses as a party if MPs were to go down that course. So I think there's no magic answers, but hard work, focus on the public priorities, set out your stall with a vision for the next 5 years and a will to win and people pulling together as a team.
You say there that you were pleased to hear that any talk of a rebellion or a coup had dissipated over the last 24 hours. I do wonder if that chatter might pick up again slightly after the loss in the West Midlands, because you know what Conservative MPs are like. They all think they can outpoll the national average and buck the polling trends because they're great personal following. But they might look at Andy Street and think, hang on a minute, if this guy has been taken out by the tide against the Conservative Party, then what hope do I do at the next election? And they might be tempted to have another roll of the leadership dice. What would you say to them?
I think that there's no evidence that any other player, who might be a leader would do better than Rishi. And I think the spectacle of the party descending into fratricide again, into fighting each other, it would mean at the minimum a number of weeks in which we were talking to ourselves, we were not talking to and listening to the country. The country would take from that we were not bothering about the economy or the health service or education or crime or immigration, and instead we were just focusing on our own internal squabbles. I think that would be a recipe for the hemorrhaging of further votes. I think the party needs to pull together as a team, show it's a broad church, the place for the right, the centre right, and the centrists in the Tory party. We're always stronger when we're a big tent party, in the way that both Andy Street and Ben Houchin have showed in their respective regions. And try to focus on the issues that the public are worrying about most, and not internal squabbling. I cannot remember when that has done us any good reputationally, and I've seen plenty of times when the party's been consumed by internal squabbling in the nearly 50 years I've been a member.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting to talk to you, as always, David Lidington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we are poised at the podium there in the West Midlands as we await the official declaration in the race to become the next mayor of the West Midlands. We understand that Labour is claiming that they have won that mayoralty, their candidate, Richard Barker, beating the incumbent Andy Street. Right, let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, shall we? Sam, I can see you kind of beavering away on your WhatsApps. What are you picking up?
The conversation has begun amongst Tory MPs about what to do next. I've been leaked the latest from the Conservative WhatsApp group this evening. Simon Clarke, who is a noted opponent and wants Rishi Sunak to leave, has just messaged these results are awful and should be a massive wake-up call. If we fight the same campaign in a few months, we'll get the same outcome, or rather worse. Reform standing more candidates will cause greater damage. I love our party and want to succeed. We do ourselves and the people we need a massive disservice if we cling on to a handful of individual successes and nonsense like a hung parliament forecast, rather than looking at the true situation. Then, Jackie Doyle-Price goes on to reply in a message where she says, we aren't giving people a reason to vote for us. But Sophie has since deleted the message, and then others piled in to try and calm things down.
Interesting. Simon Clarke, of course, has a seat in the Tees Valley, where we saw a big swing away from Ben Houchin. That is interesting to get some of that chatter being picked up. Mercy, I just wonder your take on this, because, of course, you used to work with Kemi Badenoch, often seen as someone who could step in if, as one person wants to put it, the ball should come loose at the back of the scrum to replace Rishi Sunak. Do you think it is worth rolling the dice on a change of leader?
I think there has been a lot of chaos, and I don't think the public would appreciate another change in leader. However, I don't agree with David Lidington, actually, that there's no evidence that there isn't a candidate who might actually do better. A couple of months ago, a poll of Tory voters said they thought Penny Mordaunt, for example, could beat Keir Starmer in a general election. We know from Conservative home polls that Kemi Badenoch is the most sort of popular member of the cabinet. She polls very well amongst Tory leaders. So if it is a case of if they're thinking now we need to stop tinkering around the edges and have some actual fundamental change, then I think it is right to at least have the conversation of, do we need somebody who represents that fundamental change and who represents a change in direction? But as I say, I think it would just add to the perception of chaos.
Is there another leader you think Labour would be more scared of?
I think Labour is well placed to fight whichever leader the Conservatives decide to go with at the next general election. And I think, you know, one of the things we've seen from Labour is it is a ruthless focus on the Conservative 2019 voters. You know, Labour's moving away from speaking to its base and started speaking to those voters. And I think those voters, frankly, if the Conservatives stick with Rishi Sunak, you've got a weak Prime Minister who can't lead his country, nothing seems to be changing. If the Conservatives choose to change their Prime Minister, I think millions of those voters who voted for Boris Johnson in 2019 will roll their eyes, sigh, you know, hide under the covers, turn off the TV and think, you know, this is just not a party capable of governing. So I think it's very tough for the Conservatives, whatever they do, frankly.
Sam, what's your sense? Because we knew Simon Clarke was grumpy, right? We know Simon Clarke has called for a change of leader. He was talking about an iceberg and that, you know, if you're on a ship seeing an iceberg, you'd shout and say, let's get off the ship, right? Is it just him still?
Look, I think that there is a conversation going on, and it's and it's developing right now. And I think bluntly, as a group, the Conservative Party don't know what to do. Andrew Percy's just written in that WhatsApp group, I'm sure we can all agree the last thing we need from colleagues is adding to the difficulties by offering a negative commentary. And then Ian Stewart has now weighed in saying we need to start playing as a united team and not brief against colleagues in the media.
Can I just say
Too
how
late.
Say how much I love the fact that these messages have literally just been sent and are almost simultaneously being read out on Sky News. We know that the next ones will be, I can't believe this is being read out on Sky News. Please stop writing in this WhatsApp group because it's been compromised.
I long to wake up on one Sunday morning. This is Ian Stewart MP. I long to wake up one Sunday morning and not to have to read poison from colleagues in the Sunday papers. Well, you don't have to do that because you can watch it on Sky News.
Yeah, don't worry, it'll be old news.
But I think, I think one of the things that's causing big discomfort is that Number 10 called this wrong. Number 10 called this wrong. They thought there was a chance of Susan Hall. They thought, some of them did, not others, but they thought. But the strong message I was getting from the campaign was that Andy Street would probably, on balance, be all right. Number 10 miscalculated. They did think that Ben Houchen would win, and they were right, but they didn't think Andy Street would lose, and that is a failure of political intelligence. And that matters because it is the same people whose political intelligence just failed that is having to convince the MPs that the next time that they offered them some political intelligence and that the analysis that they're now using is correct.
Thanks very much indeed. Sam Coates there with his hotline to the Tory MP WhatsApp groups. Let's go back to Beth, shall we, who is standing by in the West Midlands. Beth, any sign that declaration's coming?
Sophie, we're just waiting, but actually there was a little flurry of activity here and more people have gone down to the podium. So we're wondering if there will be a declaration soon. Some of my sources suggesting that, as I was saying earlier, Labour have won by 1,000 to 1,500 votes. There was some talk about whether there might have been a little hold-up with Sandwell, with the Tories asking some questions, and so that might be the delay. But as I said, people are now gathering, and Labour sources, their view is that if there are 1,000 to 1,500 votes ahead in Sandwell, the Tories just can't catch them up. But let's see what happens there. Sandwell has not declared yet. This is just on our understanding. But interestingly, what Sam was saying as well about Tory MPs and Simon Clarke popping up in that WhatsApp group, because you might remember that Simon Clarke, I think, is just about the only Conservative that has publicly called for Rishi Sunak to resign. You might remember earlier in the year he did that, and there was a question about whether there would be a groundswell of people flowing in behind him. That just did not happen. And it's interesting on that WhatsApp group that Sam seems to be a secret member of, that on that WhatsApp group that he has said something and then people are piling in to try and defend the Prime Minister. And it goes back to that thought about how, yes, there are many people that are despairing and wondering whether it might be better to change Prime Minister, but there is a load of chunk of people as well that think that they should stick with Rishi Sunak. And I'm sure that the recriminations will continue. But, you know, it is such a knife-edge vote here that Labour just literally squeaking it on 1,000+ votes. They could have had a much bigger win had they not had the issue of Gaza, people being very unhappy about the position in the Israel-Hamas war. And Labour sources telling me that they think that they might have lost 30,000 or so votes, certainly in the metropolitan Birmingham area, to the independent candidate, with Labour voters switching out to show their displeasure about Labour's position. But nevertheless, they have been able to hang on. And one senior Labour source said to me that this victory feels really good. And why? They said that this has been their focus for the past week. It was the symbolic one they really wanted. They didn't know if if they could win. But it tallies up, Sophie, because someone was telling me earlier this week that they had started pulling resource out of Tees Valley and bringing it all down to the West Midlands, where they had clearly been working extremely hard to try and take this jewel in the Tory crown, and now it looks like they have. And it will be interesting afterwards to see what Andy Street says, because one Conservative source is saying to me that they're not surprised that the Conservatives got punished, as they put it, for their decision on HS2. Do you remember that they decided not to extend it up to Manchester? Andy Street was fuming about that at Conservative Party conference, and there were questions about, you know, what would he do and what would he say and would he resign and all of this stuff. And so, you know, I'll be interested to see what Andy Street has to say afterwards about the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party, because it's going to really hurt. He has been the surprise winner in the mayoralty, I think, back in, was it 2017, I think? He was a surprise winner, and he's gone on to build his vote share to a 14-point lead over Labour. One Conservative source suggested to me earlier today that what might happen is that the consolation prize for Andy Street is that he's offered a safe Tory seat in the West Midlands region that is going to come up for play in the general election. I asked Andrew Mitchell about that earlier, and he told me I was getting a bit too far ahead of myself, which I probably was, but, you know, that might be a question for afterwards. But we're still waiting on the result, I'm afraid, Sophie. I think earlier today I said it might come at 3 o'clock. How wrong did I get that? But, you know, you can see you can see everyone there, and we're just waiting now for that result to come in. And I'm sure we will see Keir Starmer up here once the result is declared.
Yeah, they need to send the boxes up to Sunderland, don't they, Beth? I think we've just been poised waiting for this result all day, but it's such a big one, isn't it? And, you know, as you say, Andy Street, someone who has been building his majority since that first time he ran for the race in 2017. I think it's really true when you're talking about how he responds and how important that's going to be. Is he going to be magnanimous in defeat? Is he going to give his backing to Rishi Sunak? He could talk about HS2, he could talk about the Conservative Party. I'd be really interested to see what he decides to say tonight, if anything. Touching on his future in the Conservative Party, and it is difficult to tell right now, but there will be some, I guess, on the more centrist wing of the party who will see someone like Andy Street, who's built up this personal following, as someone who they would like to bring straight back into the fold or keep in the fold.
Yeah, and look, I think that as far as I understand it, Andy Street is still wanting to come out and do some interviews. I think he might do one with you, Sophie. I think as I understand it on the ground here, Andy Street still intends to come out and speak. So it'd be interesting to see what he has to say. But it might be that he wants to run for the mayoralty again. It might be that he does want to become an MP. So he might still want to keep relations with the Conservative Party. I just simply don't know what he's going to say. But look, I mean, you can take the Andrew Mitchell argument, which is, look how close Andy Street ran a Labour Party far ahead in the polls, and that has been gaining ground in the West Midlands. And I finally found on my phone those councils I was talking about earlier. I mean, we had straight Conservative to Labour gains, councils switching from one to the other here in Redditch, in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Oh, breaking. I've just got this in, Sophie. Hang on my phone. The Labour majority in Sandwell, we think, is 1,508 votes. So, as I was saying, just over 1,000. We think that is 1,508 votes. So that is the majority. That, I think, is less than 0.25 percentage points. I did not do that maths in my head. But someone was saying to me earlier that they thought it was about 0.25 percentage points that they won it by. So it's the thinnest of margins, but such a massive loss. And I think that's going to be really hard for Andy Street to take, because he's obviously worked so hard as the mayor. He's done it for a number of years, and now he's going to have to give way.
It's absolutely extraordinary stuff.
Oh,
Beth,
I
thank you.
Sophie, Andy Street, sorry, can you see him? Should I get out of the way? Andy Street has just walked in. You can see him, and there behind him is Richard Fisher. So we must be very near the declaration.
Andy Street there in the blue suit, walking into the hall. And as Beth was saying, just 1,508 votes in it. Politics turning on just a handful of votes. And we can confirm that Labour's Richard Parker has beaten the Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, by just 1,508 votes. He is the new Mayor of the West Midlands, and you can see there the applause. Shabana Mahmood, Liam Byrne, who of course failed to beat Andy Street. Some of the gathered Labour supporters, and they are just getting on stage right now for the declaration. There they are. The Labour candidates and the Conservative candidates. These awkward moments when they're on stage, they know what the result is, and they know that everyone's eyes are on them in the room, but also, of course, on TV screens across the country. And we are about to hear the declaration in the West Midlands to confirm that Labour has won that mayoralty by just a whisker. 1,508 votes in it. Andy Street defeated in the West Midlands. Well, there you can go. The tension's building. We thought we knew, didn't we, the result as soon as the Labour Party had their supporters in the hall first. Then, of course, we had the tweeted photo.
Declaration of result
by
of
Liam
poll.
Byrne. Here we go.
Election of a combined authority mayor for West Midlands on Thursday, the 2nd of May 2024. I, Julie Newman, being the combined authority returning officer at the above election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Harper Noons, Siobhan Bridget, Green Party, 31036. Parker Richard, Labour and Cooperative Party, 225590. Street Andrew, the Conservative Party candidate, 224082. Sandeep Singh, Liberal Democrats, 12176. Williams Elaine Ruth, Reform UK, 34471. Yaqub Ahmed, Independent, 69621. The number of ballots rejected was as follows. For want of official mark, 17. Voting for more candidates the voter was entitled to, 1,294. Writing or mark by which voter could be identified, 46. Being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty, 3,400. Total rejected, 4757. Vacant seats 1. Electorate 2018546. Ballot papers issued, 601,828. Turnout was 29.8%. And I do hereby declare that Richard Parker is duly elected.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you. I want to thank all of the staff at each polling station and at every count. Thank you for your hard work. And thank you also to Andy. You've led this region through a number of great challenges and you deserve great credit for that. You deserve credit through building up the combined authority into the powerhouse that it is today, through the economic shocks and leading this region when it came out of COVID. You've been out there representing our region, and I absolutely believe that whilst our politics are different, Andy, we both have the best interests of the West Midlands at heart. I'd also like to thank my wife Alison and my family for supporting me and being there as I've taken on this challenge, and for being there when I haven't been there. I'd also like to thank my fantastic agent Charlotte Walker for her tireless work. And thank you to all those that have helped and supported me throughout this campaign, especially Lucy Caldecott, who's been with me every day over the last 12 months, through every visit and every hustings, and I look forward to working with Lucy in office. This is the most important thing I will ever do. This week, people here voted for the person and the party. They recognise that a Labour mayor can make a positive difference in this region. Thank you. You have put your trust in me, and I will repay that trust. I will deliver for you and your family. I promise you that I will deliver jobs. We will fix our public transport system. We will build the homes you need. And we will give this region the fresh start it richly deserves. And let me be really clear. I will work with the council leaders across the combined authority to make this region a roaring success again. I will support them, I will defend them, and I will stand up for all of our councils in the face of unprecedented Tory cuts. I will also stand up for those people that didn't vote for me. This means so much to our region, but it also means so much to our country. It shows that people are calling for Labour and calling for change. People are looking once again at our party and asking us to govern. Up and down the country, people are looking for a fresh start. I hope the Prime Minister is watching today as well, because in case you haven't heard Rishi Sunak, our people are calling for a general election. I will get this region's future back, and a Labour mayor working with a Labour government will help And I believe a Labour mayor working with a Labour government will help get Britain's future back. Thank you.
We all want to go home, so let's leave all of that behind. So, Madam Returning Officer, you'll be relieved to know this is going to be a short speech, 4 thank yous and 1 reflection. And the first thank you, of course, must go to you and all your teams across the region for a well-conducted election, so thank you. The second thank you, of course, must go to my fellow candidates for a very courteous campaign, and of course, I should thank Richard indeed for how he's conducted himself in the campaign, and should congratulate him on his victory, and most importantly, wish him all strength and wisdom as he takes on this role. And then, of course, the third thanks is to my Conservative team across the region. It has been my honour to lead you for the last 7 years. I'm sorry we couldn't make it that triple or hat-trick, but mark my words, you will be back for that, I'm sure. And then, most importantly, my thanks, of course, go to everybody who voted for me on Thursday, and for the trust that they showed in me. That's perhaps the most important word in politics of all. In the end, it was not to be, but of course, that doesn't mean I appreciate that trust any less. So thank you to the voters. And then lastly, the reflection, which goes to all citizens across the West Midlands. It has, of course, been my honour to serve and to lead this place for the last 7 years. I hope I've done it with dignity and integrity. And I hope I've bequeathed to Richard a combined authority and indeed a role to which young, aspiring leaders will want to aspire one day. In a sense, I can have done no more than that. It has been a great pleasure, great privilege. But for tonight, I just want to say thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night. Andy Street there, giving his final speech from that stage in the West Midlands. The lights are off, and that really does show you, doesn't it, how quickly political fortunes can change. On the stage, every vote matters, the sign behind that podium, and really the vote tonight illustrates that. Just 1,508 votes in it. And Richard Parker is the new mayor for the West Midlands, the new Labour mayor for the West Midlands. He said he would campaign against Tory cuts. Andy Street, former boss of John Lewis, he has been beaten by the thinnest of margins. It was a short speech by Andy Street. He thanked the people of the West Midlands for putting their trust in him. Trust, he said, was the most important word in politics, and not really much of a sense on where he wants to go now. No sense about where he thinks the Conservative Party needs to go now, or himself on a personal level. I wonder if that will come in the next few days, because it should be said that Andy Street is someone who does have a personal mandate, or who has had one so far in Birmingham, and there will be an awful lot of Conservative MPs who will be watching and seeing the fact that Andy Street has been swept away in the tide of dissatisfaction with the Conservative Party, and they'll be watching their backs. Well, it's just gone 9 o'clock. You are watching Sky News and a Vote 2024 Politics Hub special. Tonight, a major blow for the Prime Minister as the Conservative mayor for the West Midlands is defeated. After recount drama, Andy Street has lost to his Labour rival, Richard Parker. We're getting full reaction on the programme tonight, because it's been another day of important election results across the country. And of course, that big breaking news this evening, the Conservative incumbent Andy Street defeated in the race for the West Midlands mayoralty, in what will be seen as a major blow for the Prime Minister. Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, is in Birmingham. She's just been listening to those declaration speeches. Beth.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, wasn't it a tight vote, as we were saying, 1,508 votes, 0.2% ahead of Andy Street. Richard Parker, the Labour candidate, becoming the West Midlands mayor, saying that the new West Midlands mayor, together with a future Labour Prime Minister, will change the country for the better. That was his line. And Andy Street there, very magnanimous, very short speech. He basically thanked everyone, and then he had a reflection about bequeathing, he said, to Richard Parker, a better West Midlands, and that, he said, was his job, and he said it being an honour and privilege to be the mayor. He said, it's been an honour to lead you for the last 7 years. I'm sorry we couldn't make it that triple hat trick, but mark my words, you will be back. He obviously was going for the third term and couldn't get it over the line. And I suspect that very shortly we will be seeing Keir Starmer here, who was in the East Midlands this morning. Arsenal then won, which he'll be delighted about, no doubt. And then the West Midlands mayoralty tonight. And one of his team were telling me how much they had been fighting to win this race, and they have just squeaked through such a wafer thin margin, but with such big implications, because really it gives him winners momentum. Sometimes politics isn't about the data and the numbers, it's about the symbolism and the momentum. And now there's a big upset. He's claimed a big prize in the Tory crown, and it will help him better argue that he is poised to really take back the battlegrounds of the West Midlands in a general election.
Beth, you were talking there about Keir Starmer, and we have had a bit of reaction from him saying this phenomenal result was beyond our expectations. People across the country has had enough of Conservative chaos and decline. They voted for change with Labour. Our fantastic new mayor, Richard Parker, stands ready to deliver a fresh start for the West Midlands. It is that momentum, like you say, isn't it, that matters. I really do wonder what Andy Street is going to do next, because it was interesting. It was a short acceptance speech. Here we go.
Andy Street's actually here. Should we try and...
Let's try and grab him.
Andy's just going past. I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to come back to us. I really just want to grab him, but I think that I might get in trouble for that. They're going to come back. They're going to come back to us in a moment, Sophie. Shall I go and listen in?
He said trust was a good
he's going to say. No, we'll come. He'll come back to us, Sophie. But yeah, as you were, what we were talking about was Keir Starmer. Look, I think the thing about this is they're giving Richard Parker a big cheer as he walks through all the activists there, Sophie. I don't know if you can see that, but he's getting a good old cheer from all the people that are gathered here. But yes, let's go back to Sir Keir Starmer. For him, this is a massive symbolic win, because in these races, you kind of need a big upset. You need a scout. You need, like, as I was saying, to take a jewel out of the cow. You need to give your opponent a body blow, and he just simply didn't do that. And I'm not saying that those council gains are important, you know, in battleground areas, but the symbolism of metropolitan mayors, you know, most of them around the country were Labour, and very hard for the Tories to prize off the Labour Party. But to take one of the two mayoralties that were kind of really the symbolism, if you like, of Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain, if you like, you know, like big leave areas across the West Midlands, turning away from Labour, turning to the Conservatives. Andy Street then building up that personal brand, as Ben Houchen did in Tees Valley. So to prize that out of the Tories' hand, it gives Labour a really powerful narrative, and they will be absolutely delighted by this. And I think, as I was saying earlier, I imagine that the way the Conservatives will spin this, if you like, or explain it, will be Andy Street ran them close when they are 20 points ahead in the polls. That's what shows you how powerful incumbency can be and work in your patch. Because what else can they say?
Beth, thank you so much. You really brought us the colour of that declaration in Birmingham, and I'm sure we're going to be going back to you very soon. Beth Rigby there from the Count in the West Midlands. Blimey. It was a short speech, wasn't it, by Andy Street, but just 1,508 votes in it in the end. But again, it's the narrative in politics, it's momentum that matters.
You'll be back. Not I'll be back, you'll be back, is what he said to the Tory activists in that speech. That was not an individual contemplating the next phase of his political career, was the thing I took away from that gracious speech that basically thanked everybody who got in there tonight, but made little hint of what he's about to say. I think the bigger reaction, though, is the one taking place inside the Conservative Party. Here's the battle right now. It's between those that want to say there's just enough of a glimmer of hope to keep going. And you saw it in those leaked WhatsApp messages. There are some like Andrew Percy and others saying, just be loyal, keep your head down. And then those are going, we're heading towards the iceberg. We have to do something. And you saw that from Simon Clarke. You saw that from Suella Braverman in a piece that she's published tonight for the Sunday Telegraph tomorrow. And actually, I think, you know, if these results over the last 48 hours are to mean anything, then they probably ought to be a wake-up call, because when I look at them across whichever way you look at the kaleidoscope, it's miserable for the Conservatives on the by-election with the third biggest swing since the war, council elections with Labour advancing in Brexit areas. There were almost no moments of like, here's a stat for you, and it's an amazing stat. There was a bigger swing to Labour in the Tees Valley, which the Tories won, than there was in the West Midlands, which Andy Street, the Tory, just lost, and Labour did one. So even in the one bright spot of the whole last 48 hours, there is a difficult and challenging story that Tories have to get their head around, and all of that is very difficult. You look at the numbers. Look at the numbers right now, and you can see that one of the striking things is you've got in fourth place you've got Reform, 34,000 votes, 6% of the vote. You know, that is more than enough. If that Reform vote hadn't been there to have propelled Andy Street, presuming that all those votes went Conservative, into top place. Although it has to be said, you've also got George Galloway supporter, Ahmed Yaqub, independent lawyer, and an extraordinary, 11% of the vote went to him. That could have boosted and allowed Labour to wipe the floor clean with the Tories, rather than it being 0.25% of the 0.3% of a majority, tiny. So this shows the power of small parties, but it also shows, I think, that it is hard to see how the Tory party reacts when the pressure is from the centre with Labour, from the right with Reform. The evidence is all over the country, and even in the one bright spot, there is a difficult story that you have to overcome if you are to truly cross your fingers and believe it's all fine.
Ness, if you're a Conservative MP now, what would you be doing?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the big theme, both from these elections and obviously something that's coming out of these leaked WhatsApp messages, is that there needs to be a change, and quite a fundamental one. And that's how I would be feeling. I think if the polls are to believe, the Conservatives are heading for a disastrous general election. And I would not be surprised if there are people saying, look, how much worse can it get? These results have been disastrous. We're doing horribly in the polls, although, of course, there is predictions that there might not be an overall majority for Labour. There might not be, a majority for Labour. But I would be thinking something needs to give. Whether that is the Prime Minister, I don't know. Whether that's Rishi Sunak, I don't know. But I think this idea that they can just sort of sit on their hands and wait it out, be loyal, I don't think that's the winning strategy at all.
Josh, it's worth reflecting that I think 11 of the 12 Metro mayors are now Labour. I mean, that is an extraordinary power base for Labour outside of London, across the country. I'm kind of fascinated by how they're going to use it in different ways. Some, I imagine, will be very, very loyal to the Labour Party. Others will want to kind of carve, a bit of an independent voice. Where do you think Richard, the new mayor for the West Midlands, was going to fall in there?
Well, I think Richard Parker and Keir Starmer will work really closely together. But it's a great point. I think I'm right in saying now that the Cooperative Party, a sister, close ally party to the Labour Party, I think the Cooperative Party now has more mayors than the Conservative Party. One of the two national political parties in Westminster. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity for Labour. This could be the first time, if Labour do win the next general election, this could be the first time in which you've got a government in Westminster that has multiple empowered mayors right across the country at a moment when growth, economic growth, is the great policy question facing Britain. And one thing we know about growth is you can't deliver growth unless you work hand in glove with mayors. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity that you will see Labour say a lot more about both before the general election and then hopefully operationalise if Labour do win the general election afterwards.
What they're going to do if they win is it's easy for the Conservative Party. You've only got a couple of mayors to worry about to kind of channel into the Tees Valley. They're going to be, have demands all over the country.
That's right. But the person that actually we all want to hear from now is Andy Street. Look, there is a guy who put everything after leaving business to go into politics, after leaving the top of John Lewis to go into politics. And I do wonder just how much he feels let down by Rishi Sunak. It was that HS2 issue that he really fought very hard to stop the Prime Minister cancelling the Northern Leg, put his own career on the line. It was a moment last week when Andy Street put Boris Johnson on his final leaflet. He got Boris Johnson to write a letter to the constituents of the West Midlands to try and convince them to stick with him than to flip to Labour. That tells you something about Andy Street's lack of trust in Rishi Sunak. Is he prepared to admit that that's what it is? And does he think, having watched the Conservative machine trying to support him, that the future of the Conservative Party is ever further in the direction that Suella Braverman wants? Or does he think that there is a path perhaps wrestling it away from control of the members back to the kind of conservatism that I think Andy Street espouses and backs. I mean, Andy Street has taken a curious journey. I think he backed Liz Truss.
He did back Liz Truss.
And then
it's worth knowing he did back Liz Truss.
And so you can't paint by numbers exactly what his political views are, but nevertheless. Is this somebody who is going to wind up his political career because he thinks this phase of Conservative leadership is done?
We didn't get many clues from his speech, did we? It was a very magnanimous speech. You know, he talked an awful lot about the era he represented. He thanked everyone who'd got him to that position. But he didn't give many clues in why he thought he lost, in what he was going to do next, and in what his assessment, I guess, was for where the Conservative Party should go. We didn't pick up anything, did we?
I mean, if I were Andy Street, I would be doing that regardless of my intentions. You know, he's a class politician, and you know, he's unlikely in the fury of the moment to deliver any serious message. But I think I'd be amazed if Andy Street did not see himself as a protagonist in the fight for the soul of conservatism in Britain. You know, he cares about moderate conservatism, he cares about economic growth and economic policy, and over the coming weeks and months, I mean, you've already seen it for most of this parliament, but there will be a real argument about what conservative politics is, and there is a real chance that the Conservative Party moves further to the right, further away from the kind of place that Andy Street thinks they need to go. And I'd be pretty baffled if a senior Conservative politician like him can sit back and watch that happen.
But it depends whether he sees himself first and foremost as a politician or Andy Street sees him first and foremost as a civic person whose life has straddled business and politics and whose options open up before him. You know, the thing that he took the greatest pride in, I think, was bringing investment. His longtime friend Michael Fabricant tweeting that he brought in more investment into the West Midlands than to Scotland and to Wales together. There is a sort of growth champion element to what he's done that he will want to put at the centre of that. But is that the Conservative Party of the future?
Well, let's try and find out, shall we? Hopefully we may be able to answer some of these questions pretty soon, because we can go to Birmingham, where I am crossing my fingers and hoping that we may be able to speak to Andy Street.
Yes, Sophie, I'm here. I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us. We've been talking about you an awful lot over the last couple of hours, I will admit. So thank you very much for speaking to us. First of all, what's your reaction? You must be disappointed to lose by such a small margin.
Of course. I mean, disappointed is a soft word, but we'll go with it. Yeah, I am. But I'm also incredibly proud, actually, to lose by 1,500 in a region of millions, given the situation the party finds itself in, and given that this has always been a place where some people said you should never have won in the first place. I'm actually very, very proud of what we've done. I'm proud of how we've built this brand of conservatism here, and I'm proud, most importantly of all, of how we've delivered for people across the West Midlands. But yeah, of course, hugely disappointed tonight.
You said that disappointed is a soft word. What word would you choose then?
I suppose personally devastated, but yeah, that's the right word. I put my all into this. I genuinely believed we were making real progress across the region on so many pieces, and for that to be closed off, that's disappointing in the extreme.
It is worth reflecting that you have massively outperformed how the Conservatives have performed across the country. It was always going to be a tall order to hang on in the West Midlands when the Conservatives are 20 points behind in the polls, and we've seen swings all over the place around the country today. And if it's not too painful a question, why do you think you lost today?
Oh, I think that's straightforward. We did not persuade enough people that our record was as good as I believed it was, or that our plans for the future were exciting enough. It didn't motivate enough people to get out and vote on Thursday. That's very straightforward. I'm sure when all the analysis is done, there'll be lots more to be said. But ultimately, it was my campaign. I ran it my way, and it did not convince enough people. And that you have to step forward and acknowledge tonight.
You say it was your campaign, but do you not think it was the national Conservative Party picture that led to this defeat?
It was my campaign, totally. And it was my campaign 7 years ago, it was my campaign 3 years ago, and that's the nature of the mayoralty.
and I am not going to try to push responsibility anywhere else. One of the wonderful things about this job, a bit like being chief executive of a company, you are ultimately responsible, and there'll be no slopey shoulders from me.
We talked a lot about HS2. I remember a Conservative conference when you found out the result of HS2, that it wasn't going to be extended, that the Prime Minister had made that decision. Do you think that decision has affected the result today in the West Midlands?
I don't particularly know. Quite a lot of people have said to me, I'll tell you the truth, Sophie. Many people have said to me, when you stood up to the Prime Minister, then it actually showed you were our independent mayor. So much there was great disappointment in the West Midlands at that decision. There was actually some admiration for how I dealt with it. So net, I don't think that had a huge impact. But of course, so many people said at that point, but Andy, you should have resigned over it. Had I resigned, I would not be here for the future debate about the future of the Conservative Party. And remember, the thing everyone should take from Birmingham and the West Midlands tonight is this brand of moderate, inclusive, tolerant conservatism that gets on and delivered has come within an ace of beating the Labour Party in what they consider to be their backyard. That's the message from here tonight.
That's really interesting. And I know that you're being very, very careful to accept responsibility, to not pin blame on Rishi Sunak. You're not going to give that interview, I can tell. But if you were going to advise the Prime Minister on the route now to winning the next general election, what would you say to him?
The thing that kept coming back to me on the doorstep, and as you said, we've outperformed expectations here, and the reason that was what kept coming back is you've got the job done, Andy. So if I could say one thing to the Prime Minister and his team, would be concentrate on the job and getting that done. That's what people want. They want confidence in their politicians to deliver. That, I think, is the message from here tonight.
Are you worried that the Conservative Party are... You talked about, winning effectively from the kind of centre ground, if you like. Are you worried about the Conservative Party drifting to the right, to overemphasising the threat from reform and ignoring other voters?
I would definitely not advise that drift. I mean, the psephology here is really very straightforward, isn't it? This is the youngest, most diverse, one of the most urban places in Britain, and we've done, many would say, extremely well over a consistent period. And the local council results across many of our councils here in the West Midlands yesterday were also extremely encouraging. So the message is clear. Winning from that centre ground is what happens.
Some Conservatives might be looking at the result and thinking, goodness me, if Andy Street can't hang on, I've got no chance. They might be tempted to move against Rishi Sunak. What would be your message to them?
I would not advise that. If you think of what I've just said, Sophie, what I've just said is clear, that it's all about delivery. We don't need another period where we are debating leadership. Could not be clearer in my mind.
Now, you've obviously been fighting right up to the last moment to win this mayoral contest. So it may be a bit early to ask you this question, but I'm interested to know where you see yourself going. Do you see yourself as a protagonist in the fight for the future of the Conservative Party? Do you want to wash your hands with them and do something completely different? What does the future hold for Andy Street?
Sophie, an inevitable question, and the answer is I haven't got a clue, because I think you know about me, as we've had discussions over the years. I'm an all-in person, want to give myself fully to something. That's what I've done to this mayoralty, and I haven't even begun to think about the other options. Might be time for a few days, weeks off to have a bit of time for reflection on that.
Someone did tweet, I have to say, it's my final sort of point to you. Someone did tweet to say that they wonder what the odds are for you as the next Conservative Party leader.
Oh, people who are on Twitter have clearly got nothing better to do. So I've told you, I'm having time to just reflect on it all, and most importantly, look back at what I hope I've delivered for the West Midlands over the last 7 years and what I hope I bequeath to my successor. That's what this is ultimately all about.
Well, we've had an awful lot of interviews together. I've come to see you in the West Midlands many times over those 7 years, and it's always a pleasure to interview you.
You have.
So thank you for taking the time to speak to us on a difficult night tonight, and I hope to interview you again soon.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Good night.
Thank you, Andy. Andy Street there, the defeated candidate in the West Midlands. Well, he was very cautious, wasn't he? He was very careful in what he was saying. He didn't want to be critical of the Prime Minister, and he wanted to accept responsibility for that defeat. But he did have a message for the Conservative Party, didn't he?
He did. and we'll come on to the message in a moment, but it will have been felt even more strongly because of how much that looked like it hurt. Look at his face. It was etched in pain. He said to you towards the end, I'm an all-in guy, and he gave it his all. And I don't think after watching your interview with him, there is any doubt that that's the case. He said two things, I think, that were very important. The first, he said, I didn't resign back last in the autumn because if I'd done that, I wouldn't be here to fight for a future for the Conservative Party. And I thought that was a clue.
Yes.
That actually he is in here for that fight.
Too. I thought
and then later in the interview, he gave a very strong steer that the fight worth having, as it were, was a one to stop the Conservative Party drifting further to the right, pulling out of ECHR, the Human Rights Convention, basically trying to ape that Reform UK party that came forth in the elections, and I think that's enough. He hasn't got a plan, but I mean the guy lost 20 minutes ago a job that he'd poured his heart and soul into and is clearly very devastated. So I'm not sure he needs to come up with a plan on telly this quickly, but I think we know a lot after that interview.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Sam. We are just looking at some pictures now from Birmingham. We're expecting a celebration victory rally there for Richard Parker, the Labour candidate. You can see, or I shouldn't say, actually, the new Labour mayor of the West Midlands, Richard Parker, his supporters gathering there. Keir Starmer could be an appearance from the Labour leader there as well. Yeah, Sam, I agree. I think actually what struck me most from the interview is this is somebody who we're going to be hearing more from. That was my main takeaway, and I wasn't sure, like you said, like maybe he did want to wash his hands from the whole thing. But this is someone who was giving some clues, wasn't he? I thought
he kept his powder dry because he's coming back. Was the strongest hint that we've got. There were people in the Labour Party in tears, actually, in the front row. I don't know whether you saw it just ahead of just as the announcement was being made. And some of those people, I think, are the ones that we're looking at the moment, Labour activists, looking to cheer their moment.
Because it certainly is
There's
it's a big win.
Shabana Mahmood, the Shadow Justice Secretary on the right. She has been with Richard Parker and posted on social media pictures of her with Richard Parker. She was fanning herself.
This is hot in there.
It does look hot. There's an awful lot of people crammed into that room, taking advantage of their victory there. There was a message, though, wasn't there, from Andy Street for the Rebels. This is not the time to move against Rishi Sunak. That was the other thing that stood out to me, as well as his advice on the direction of the Conservative Party. Don't move towards reform, stay in the centre ground. He also said now is not the time to change leader.
Yes, absolutely. So an effective endorsement of Rishi Sunak continuing as Prime Minister, even if not an overt one. I think the message he's sending is absolutely very clear, because this is the big ideological debate in the Conservatives at the moment. Reform got over 34,000 votes. Some people will be taking to Twitter, I'm sure, to say, you know, be careful what you wish for. If you hadn't sort of voted for reform, actually Andy Street would have won. And there will be people saying, you know, the existence of reform, the potential return of Nigel Farage is going to pose a big threat to the Conservatives, and perhaps we need to move further right. But I think the message he's sending is very clear, and I think it's an admirable one.
There we go, Keir Starmer. It didn't take him long, did it? There he is. Hugging Shabana Mahmood, standing there with Richard Parker, and it looks like they're about to say a few words. Josh, you can't begrudge the Labour leader wanting to claim some credit for this result.
No, the speed of him getting there is immensely impressive, among other things. I think he's going to say something.
Might have been the face of the campaign. My name might have been the name on the ballot paper, but we won this as one team and one Labour team. But we haven't only won for our people and the Labour members and Labour councillors and Labour MPs in this region. We've won for all those people that have had their hopes and their livelihoods taken away and so badly damaged by this Tory government and this Tory mayor. and we will change it. It's time for a fresh start. Working with the Labour Party, we'll deliver that, and we start on Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. What a way to end the local elections in 2024, general election year. We started in Blackpool with a 26% swing, and we've ended in the West Midlands with our new mayor, Richard Parker, as the West Midlands mayor. Plenty in between of mayoralties, of councils, and of course our police and crime commissioners. An untold story of these elections so far. So a fantastic way to end this batch of elections. And the way we went about it here in the West Midlands really, really matters, because the government felt, the Tories felt, that they were entitled to victory here, that they could use Andy Street as some sort of crutch for Rishi Sunak's weak leadership, and that they didn't have to be in touch with the priorities of the people. We ran a completely different campaign. We were grounded in the priorities of the people that we now represent in the West Midlands. We showed that our values are their values, and we humbly asked them to put their trust and confidence in a changed Labour Party, and they did. And that is a significant piece of political history that we've made here today. And I say to every single person who voted Labour on Thursday in these elections, thank you. Thank you for putting your trust and confidence in a changed Labour Party. I say to everybody who didn't vote Labour, who voted for other parties, including the Conservative Party, that we will serve you. Richard will serve you. The Labour Party will serve you, because this is a changed Labour Party. It is a party of service. And I say directly to those who may have voted Labour in the past, but felt that on this occasion that they couldn't, that across the West Midlands, we are a proud and diverse community. And I've heard you. I've listened. And I'm determined to meet your concerns and to gain your respect and trust again in the future. Because the big story of all these elections, including these elections, is a nation that is desperate to turn the page and move on. And this is the message to the Prime Minister and to the government. So many people have had enough of 14 years of decline that has cost them and their families and their communities. They're fed up with the chaos and the division and the non-delivery, and they want to turn the page, turn their back on that decline and usher in national renewal with Labour, a Labour Party with a plan to bring the country together, with a plan to deliver on our health services, our infrastructure, our public services, take our streets back, and have a plan for the future of Britain. So the message out of these elections, the last elections now, the last stop before we go into that general election, is the country wants change. I hope the Prime Minister is listening and gives the opportunity to the country to vote as a whole in a general election as soon as possible. Thank you.
Keir Starmer there, celebrating his victory in the West Midlands. You can see him there. Hopefully we'll be able to hear from the Labour leader soon. Josh, let's get some reaction from you. I mean, it's a big win for Labour, isn't it? And it was interesting to hear from you that in the recent days and weeks, they've been pulling resources away from the Tees Valley to focus on the West Mids.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of really tightly focused, well-targeted campaign operation that you'll see from Labour now, you know, pretty much and through until the general election, whenever that comes. I mean, I thought Andy Street actually put it pretty well. He said, in the end, the psephology is very simple. Two things matter in these results. The swing matters. How big's the swing from the Conservative Party to the Labour Party? And what we've seen right across the country, including in Tees Valley, where they...
I'm going to break in. Sorry, John.
We'll come back.
I keep interrupting you, but Beth Rigby is with Keir Starmer, so you'll forgive me.
Tonight, the momentum that was missing a bit yesterday, when you put on just 170 council seats, you didn't win Harlow. Does this feel like the momentum that you were looking for to go out on?
Well, I think if you look at these election results as a whole, you saw that the bookending is Blackpool by-election, 26% swing to the Labour Party, a phenomenal result there. Taking the West Midlands mayoralty at the end, and then much in between. Look at the East Midlands, where there's underlying constituencies that are so important in the general election. Look at York and North Yorkshire, again, traditional Conservative area where we're up there winning votes, and many councils in between. So this, I think, is vindication of the hard work that we've done to change the Labour Party. But I'm humble, and I know that every vote has to be earned into the general election. We've shown progress. I'm pleased about that. We step up again towards the general election only for this purpose, so that we can serve the working people of Britain once again as a new and changed.
This was a knife edge. When the result finally came through, did you do a little jig? I mean, what did how did it feel?
I'm not going to talk you through exactly what happened when the result, but I'm so pleased.
What happened?
I saw it as vindication of the hard work of the team here, of all the Labour Party pulling together and delivering the progress that we needed to show. But our purpose is to serve our country, and we've taken a really big step towards the service of our country.
I want to ask you one more question because it really matters. You won by 1,500 votes. People are talking about in the Birmingham metro area that you might have lost 30,000 votes to the independent candidate because people are really upset with Labour and you about your stance on the Israel-Hamas war. How much of a problem is it? You said that you have heard them. What are you going to actually do?
Well, look, I think we won many votes here. It was always going to be tight. You had an incumbent mayor who was distancing himself from the government. And so this was always going to be a tight fight. We've never won this mayoralty before. But look, where we have not been able to persuade people who might otherwise have voted Labour, it is important for me to acknowledge that and to say I've heard, I've listened, and I am determined to meet the concerns that they have and to win back their trust and confidence. That is really important, but nothing takes away from the significance of this victory here in the West Midlands, on top of all the other gains that we made in this set of local elections, the last local elections, the last stop before that general election.
I'll take this one back.
There you go, Beth Rigby there speaking to Keir Starmer, the Labour leader there. I didn't quite say he danced a jig when he heard the result, but he seemed pretty happy about it, didn't he? And well he might, Sam.
That's right. I mean, he's right to say that the final result of the set of local elections, which is basically its last big one, bookends with brilliant news for the Labour Party, just as the first big result, which was the Blackpool South by-election, was brilliant news for the Labour Party. And effectively, he was saying it was a win, repeating his call for the Prime Minister to call a general election. And I think the joy was sort of understandable. The Labour Party has poured a huge amount into the whole of the Midlands, not just the West Midlands, but the East Midlands as well, because of all of the swing seats. Roughly half of the seats in the West Midlands are there to be taken by Labour currently with Conservative MPs. So it really matters a sense of momentum in this region. But it also matters perhaps even more from a Conservative point of view. What this has done is blown a hole in a big argument. that the Tories wanted to make, which is that if you're a big personality, be it a constituency MP or a mayor like Ben Houchen, you can perhaps outperform the polls and show the public that you can deliver and cling on. And suddenly, one of the biggest names in Tory politics has not been able to do that. He's not been able to withstand the tide. And this is a problem, because this is all about the psychology of MPs right now. It's all about their emotional response, not necessarily to the psephology, but to the narrative, and to be able to convince themselves that they're not running into failure. And that's the conversation that we can see with Tory MPs tonight. And in the last few moments, I've got some more leaked WhatsApps, just developing that conversation. And what we've got, and this is fascinating, it's just gone on the group of Conservative MPs, is Conservative headquarters hitting back against those who are saying it's time to ditch Rishi Sunak. Rick Holden, the Conservative Party chairman, has just put out a message to all Tory MPs saying, look, this was 1,508 votes out of 3 million. In other words, it might be a win, but it's a tiny number. And in 2017, the high point of Theresa May's premiership, he won by 3,000. So be realistic, the circumstances have changed. Then they quote Michael Thrasher, our Sky's own analyst, saying, look, the projection off the back of the local elections is that the Conservative Party is only 9 percentage points behind rather than 20 points behind. So things aren't so bad, guys. So he's mounting a case for defence. 2 MPs come in. I don't think you'll expect what comes in next. Jackie Doyle-Price replies to Rick Holden going, great interview with Andy on Sky News just now. Colleagues would do well to heed his message.
Hello, Jackie, by the way.
And then Steve Brine weighs in. If I can just go down. In fact, I've got it on my phone, because then he says, well, there are some comments on this thread, Coates.
That's you.
Definitely won't read out. I'm really excited to see those. And I haven't been sent them, funnily enough. But seriously, having watched Andy, I think a lot of Tories are watching you tonight, Sophie, but seriously, having watched Andy in the past 7 years and heard him be a total master of his brief during the campaign, it's clear politics isn't fair. Andy is a true class act. Anyway, dare I say it, we haven't heard the last of Andy Street. What does that tell us? Well, it doesn't tell us that there's a groundswell of people all saying we're going to put in letters. It tells us that Tory MPs right now are girding their loins for a battle for the soul of the Conservative Party. The starting gun on that battle was effectively fired by Andy Street, and they're all getting going on that battle. It's not one about the general election. It's not one about winning seats. They know that that's problematic, to say the least, after the last 24, 48 hours of results. It's about what does conservatism mean? Where does it go now? Is it Andy Street's type? Is it something else that Suella Braverman's tonight calling for? It's a sort of existential crisis for the party. That's where we've ended up at the end of these local elections.
It really does feel that way, doesn't it? And again, we're not getting the sign that there is going to be a serious move. I mean, I don't know, correct me if you think that it feels right now that it's more about the debate about the direction of the party. You've got Suella Braverman writing op-eds in the newspapers that will be published tomorrow. You've got Andy Street carefully, not wanting to be seen disloyal, but reminding, he would say, Rishi Sunak, that he believes the Conservative Party can only win from the centre. These debates are going to continue.
There are many, many, many ways that a political party can trip up and embroil itself in a row. That business of 53 letters of no confidence going into Graham Brady and then there being a vote of no confidence in Rishi Sunak and seeing what happens, that's only one path. It doesn't quite feel the path we're on tonight, but just because it's not the path we're on tonight doesn't mean that there isn't big problem ahead as MPs choose whether or not to believe what Rick Holden's been telling them. Look, guys, it's not as bad as it sounds in the media, or whether chooses to look at the results and draw a different conclusion.
And the thing is, you look at these results and look, we all know, we've all been in the game long enough where we know that parties will pick the results that tell the story they want. But right now, the only bright spot to the Conservatives is Ben Houchen in Tees Valley, where he lost 20% of the vote, losing a vote share that would wipe out, I think, every Conservative MP in that region if it was replicated in a general election.
Bigger than the West Midlands. There was a bigger swing against the Tory party than the West Midlands.
Somehow clinging on in Harlow despite losing 5 seats. But, I mean, that is not a general election winning position, is it? You know, it's been a terrible set of results for the Conservative Party, Josh.
It has. I mean, whether you look at swing, as you say, in Tees Valley, the only place really where the Conservative Party did what they said they would, or whether you look at, crucially, where Labour's winning, Labour is winning the most votes in the places where it needs to win the most votes to win the next general election. I mean, Labour won't be taking anything for granted. It was interesting, I thought, that you heard Keir Starmer there say, I want to speak to those voters who have voted Labour in the past but haven't this time. I want to say that I've heard you and that, you know, he recognises there's a task to be done. So Labour won't be taking any votes for granted. But, you know, look, as a Labour person, it feels good. You know, 3 years ago, we were a bankrupt party. We just lost a record defeat. And now here we are, a professional party, focused on service, focused on working people and, you know, frankly, ready to govern.
Mercy, what's your take on where the Conservative Party should go?
Well, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, one of the silver linings, if you can take any out of this situation, is that I don't think what we've seen is a huge resounding vote for Labour. If you look at the number of seats they've gained, this is by no means, you know, people turning up to the ballot box desperate to vote for a Labour government. I think this is a vote for something else. People want something else. And I think if it was the case that voters were ideologically aligning with Labour, that would be a far more significant problem for the Conservatives. So I do think the Conservatives do now have a real opportunity to, you know, look at themselves in the mirror and say, look, what do we stand for? What kind of party do we want to lead? And I think actually this defeat in the West Midlands will provide a perfect opportunity for that.
Yeah, it does look like that conversation is already starting. Thank you both very much indeed, and Sam as well. Right, let's just pause now for a second. I think we all need it. I definitely need a little bit of a breather because we've had all this drama in Birmingham with the West Midlands mayoralty tonight. But let's not forget, we've also had plenty of other significant results come through today. We're going to have more to come from Birmingham. But for now, we can take a breath. I'm going to take a sip of my cup of tea and we can take stock with our political correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. Gurpreet.
Well, we're just waiting for one council still to declare, but we've got a pretty full picture of how everything's played out. You can see here from our tally that Labour are way out in the lead with over 1,000 seats. It's the Conservatives who had a really bruising 48 hours, losing basically half the seats that they were defending. This graphic is useful because it shows us the churn that's happening behind the scenes. And you can see that Labour, yeah, they picked up 257 seats, but they lost 72. And it looks like the party is having some problems on its left flank with progressives, younger voters and Muslim voters who are angry about its position on the conflict in Israel and Gaza. It may explain why the Greens and the independent parties are having a good night. We can also see that reflected in our national equivalent vote share. That's when we take a look at the results that we've had and we project them up onto a national level. And you can see that Labour, since 2021, that was the Conservatives' highest ebb when they were benefiting from that vaccine rollout, have picked up votes. But they're not doing anything like as well as they were doing in the 90s during the Blair era. And that can partly be explained by the fact that independent, smaller parties are a much bigger force in local politics these days. You can see that playing out here because Labour over the past year, well, the vote share has actually dipped, not so much as the Conservatives, however, so they might not be too worried about it, but it's the independents that are causing both parties problems. Now, some caveats to bear in mind. How will all of this play out in a general election? Well, when it comes to independent, smaller parties, people may feel more empowered to vote for them in local elections, but may not necessarily do the same in the general election. They may coalesce around the bigger parties. Also, this doesn't factor in Scotland, and Scotland will be a really important factor in the general election. We know Labour are eyeing up a number of seats north of the border. Overall, fair to say it's been a disappointing 48 hours for the Conservatives. There was that crushing defeat in the by-election in Blackpool South as well, and also in the mayoral contests. We've just got that result in from the West Midlands. But you can see our mayoral map is looking even more red than it was before we went into this. There's that tiny patch of blue over there. That's the Tees Valley, where Ben Houchen has held on to the mayoralty over there. But if we drill further into the data here, we can see that his majority has been significantly reduced from 73% in 2021, worth bearing in mind there are only 2 candidates running there, so that might partly explain why it was so large, to 54%, undoubtedly been hurt by the Conservatives' popularity, despite running a largely personal campaign, didn't wear the rosette on stage, omitted any reference to the Conservatives or many references to the Conservatives in his campaign literature, but has held on to that. Andy Street, however, wasn't so lucky. It was a tense battle, but in the end, the former mayor missed out to Labour. That will worry the Conservatives and disappoint the Prime Minister.
Gurpreet, thank you very much indeed. We're going to go straight to Birmingham because I believe we can now speak to Richard Parker, the victorious Labour candidate, the new mayor for the West Midlands. Congratulations on your win. Why do you think people chose you as their mayor?
Well, there's no doubt that the great work the party's done nationally has given me a platform for victory. But what mattered most to the people here was my policy platform for the West Midlands to support and help working people, about creating jobs, 150,000 new jobs and training places, bringing the buses back into public control and delivering the largest programme of social housing we've had in this region for more than 40 years.
What kind of mayor are you going to be? Because it feels to me like you've got 2 types of mayor. You've got a mayor who are very, very loyal to their party leaders, who are, you vote for you're voting for the Labour Party, or you get these mayors who see themselves as independent, challenging voices, kind of big personalities for their regions. Where do you see yourself?
So I want to work really closely with a future Labour government, and I think that's the best way for us to work together for the wider benefit of this region. But I also want to be a different type of leader to Andy Street, or a different type of mayor. I want to work really closely with the key stakeholders in this region, with the council leaders, because the best way to deliver change for this region is working collectively on a aligned set of policy priorities that benefit everyone.
I know Keir Starmer's probably, maybe even listening in. He's very close to you, I'm sure. So you can whisper it if you like. But are you willing to kind of stand up to him if he is the next Prime Minister?
Yes, I will. Yeah, I will stand up and have honest conversations with Keir if he's Prime Minister, and about what we need for this region. But I won't be doing what Andy Street did and throwing tantrums at party conferences and throwing my toys out the pram. I want to work with Labour in government. The best way for me to deliver for the West Midlands is working Labour in government, Labour in power, to make the biggest difference to the people of this region.
Labour, I think, now holds 11 of the 12 metro mayors across the country. It has been, a resounding success for the Labour Party, picking up council seats across the country, and also, of course, that Blackpool South result. What do you think voters have shown today?
Sorry, there's a lot of noise in the background. Could you just repeat the question?
How would you sum up the results that we've seen across the country, not just in the West Mids?
No, so we've had a fantastic series of results over the last 3 days. It puts Labour in a position to win the general election, but there's still a great deal of work to do. And if we do that, I'm confident we can deliver the change the country needs. OK, and just a very quick thought. Are you worried at all about voters turning away from you over Gaza? I've spent a lot of time with our inner city communities and our Muslim community. I've been listening to them. I understand their concerns, and I'll be working my hardest in office to rebuild trust with them so they come back to Labour as soon as possible. I'm going to let you go. I can see there's a lot of people who want to celebrate with you. Thank you very much for being on the programme. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, it has been a roller coaster a couple of days. A seismic set of election results. I think we really have got a sense of the direction of travel for the country with that astounding result in the West Midlands too. All I can say is thank you very much for choosing for a seat on this roller coaster on the Politics Hub and for joining me and the team here over an extraordinary couple of days. We'll see you next week.